In a peaceful and happy, disgusting village, a carriage travels along the cobblestone streets. Inside, a greasy husband named Kang Naru feels a deep sense of unease and asks his baddie wife, Ashley, if she finds the ride frustrating. Hoping to salvage their relationship, he suggests that they step out of the carriage to talk for a moment, but Ashley calmly asks what they would even discuss. Naru nervously brings up the topic of their upcoming divorce, wondering aloud if they simply failed to communicate enough during their marriage. Ashley, however, gently shuts down the conversation, stating that they have already made a firm and final decision. As they continue their journey to finalize the divorce, Naru reflects on how his life reached this point. Originally a South Korean who was mysteriously transported to this fantasy world a few years prior, Naru found himself endowed with an immense power that quickly earned him fame as a renowned warrior of the realm. It was during his usual duties of defeating demons that he first met Ashley. The two fell deeply in love almost immediately and quickly held a wedding. However, shortly after getting married, Naru learned that his wife's family, the Lapones, harbored a dark secret and suffered under a historical curse. The trouble began generations ago when one of Ashley's ancestors decided to secretly watch the ancient goddess of the eastern wind, Vera, while she was cleaning her clothes in a secluded waterfall pool. Completely mesmerized by the goddess's beauty, the ancestor became obsessed with what he had witnessed. Instead of keeping the secret to himself, the ancestor foolishly began boasting about his experience to guests at dinner tables, speaking openly about the goddess's washing stamina. This disrespectful boasting quickly triggered a powerful curse upon the entire family lineage. The goddess Vera had cursed the ancestor to suffer a severe seizure whenever he looked at water, ensuring he could never approach any body of water again. Desperate to free his lineage from this torment, the head of the family pleaded with Naru to defeat the goddess and lift the curse. Confident and eager to help for the sake of his beloved wife, Naru readily agreed to the request. Upon confronting the goddess, Vera recognized his purpose and proposed a bet instead of a straight battle. The terms of the wager required Naru to live a life at absolute rock bottom without ever revealing the agreement to anyone. To set the bet in motion, Vera stripped Naru of his warrior strength, leaving him powerless on the battlefield, where he was subsequently gravely injured. Returning home as a broken and defeated soldier, Naru faced public mockery, and a deeply ashamed Ashley eventually handed him divorce papers. Though Naru felt a quiet resentment, he was bound by the bet and could not explain the truth. Back in the present, as the carriage arrives at their destination, Ashley coldly tells Naru to get off by himself and warns him never to expect her help again. As Naru slowly exits using a crutch, he wonders if she would still love him if she knew his downfall was entirely for her sake. Soon after, the court officially nullifies the marriage under the name of God. Walking away with a heavy limp, Naru resolves not to look back with regret. He decides to hide out at the Thunderfield Guildhouse to avoid the impending gossip. 2 weeks later, while resting in bed and reading, Naru is interrupted by a sudden knock on his door. Annoyed because he had asked the guildmaster for a month of complete privacy, Naru sets his book aside and opens the door to find the queen's aide. The well-dressed man tips his hat, confirming Naru's identity before asking if his legendary strength has finally returned, explaining that Her Majesty is anxiously waiting for his comeback. Naru apologizes to the queen's aide, explaining that his power has still not returned. Ever since his divorce, the royal palace has continuously sent messengers to his door, pleading with him to accept new missions. The desperate aide asks if there is truly nothing Naru can do to help, emphasizing that Naru is the only person capable of retrieving the specific item Her Majesty desires. Still, Naru stands firm, stating that while he would love to assist, he is currently nothing more than a powerless divorcee. He politely asks the aide to convey this message back to the queen and promptly slams his wooden door shut to end the conversation. Almost immediately, the knocking resumes, prompting a frustrated Naru to sigh at the visitor's sheer tenacity. Losing his temper, he swings the door open to shout that he has already given his final answer. To his complete surprise, it is not the royal representative standing on the other side, but rather his former adventure comrade, Melissa. With a playful smile, Melissa greets him and casually offers her mock congratulations on his recent divorce. Exasperated, Naru scratches his neck and dryly responds that there is nothing to congratulate him about, though he admits it has indeed been a long time since they last saw each other. Before Naru got married, Melissa was a trusted companion who shared in his many adventures, but she currently works as a professor at Visdra Academy. Observing his disheveled state, Melissa cheerfully teases him, asking if he is living a bit too much like an invalid. She laughingly remarks that divorce is really no big deal, sharing that she is also a divorcee, and wonders why he is letting it keep him so slumped. To break him out of his funk, she enthusiastically slaps him on the back, sending a jolt of pain through Naru and leaving him wincing with a sore spot. Upon closer inspection, Melissa is genuinely startled by how thin and frail Naru has become and expresses deep concern for his physical state. Trying to move past the topic, Naru shifts the focus by asking how she even managed to discover his hiding place. Melissa explains that she immediately went to the guildmaster for answers upon hearing the rumors, before gently asking if he is truly doing okay. Naru reassures her that there is no need to worry so much. Sensing that a change of scenery is exactly what he needs, Melissa brightly proposes that they go out to grab some drinks to lift his spirits, happily declaring that the entire tab will be on her. Although Melissa had invited him out for a drink, Naru is somewhat surprised to find himself brought directly to her home. As they settle into the cozy room warmed by a blazing fireplace, Melissa welcomingly invites him to make himself at home. Naru clarifies that while he is not feeling uncomfortable, he is still curious about why she chose her house instead of a tavern. Melissa casually replies that she simply has some excellent alcohol stocked up at home. This explanation makes Naru wonder if she is being deeply considerate of him, knowing he might feel self-conscious or bothered by other people's stares in public after his recent divorce. Melissa generously pours the drinks and proposes a toast to celebrate Naru's new single life. As Naru downs his drink, he ponders whether his warm feelings are due to his recent complete isolation from social contact, or if the alcohol is simply taking effect. Regardless of the reason, he finds immense comfort in catching up with his long-lost comrade, and the two lose themselves in endless conversation as the night grows quiet outside. Feeling slightly flushed from the alcohol, Naru brings up the past, asking Melissa if she remembers the time he saved her. Melissa smiles warmly, replying that she could never forget, noting that she would not even be alive today if not for his timely intervention. However, the light-hearted mood takes a sudden turn as Melissa hesitates, blushing deeply. She nervously wonders aloud what would have happened if she had confessed her feelings to him back then, questioning if he would have accepted her. Naru is completely caught off guard by her sudden revelation, nervously scratching his neck and laughing. He responds that the idea of them becoming a couple seems impossible, pointing out that their fellow comrades would have teased them relentlessly. Melissa plays it off with a gentle laugh, agreeing that they were indeed practically like blood-related siblings back in those days. Her hands and feet fidget slightly as she adds that since they always joked around with each other, it would have been highly unlikely for genuine feelings to develop between them. She continues to laugh, assuring him that she was merely speaking hypothetically, yet, as she holds her drink, a fleeting look of bittersweet melancholy passes over her face. Realizing that the conversation has taken a slightly awkward turn, Melissa suggests that they move past the weird mood and simply focus on drinking more. As the night progresses, empty wine bottles begin to pile up and roll across the floor. Naru, now heavily intoxicated and red-faced, slurs his words while asking if the alcohol is already gone, urging her to hurry up and pour more. Leaning lazily on her arm with a sleepy grin, Melissa suddenly steers the conversation toward a very sussy topic, asking Naru how things were between him and his former wife in gym workouts. Naru immediately deflects the intrusive query, asking why she is even curious about such matters, and turning the question back on her to ask about her own past experiences. Melissa confidently declares that she always did an exceptionally good job in her 1v1 gaming match relationships. Hearing this, a drunken Naru scoffs and mockingly mutters that a tomboy like her could never have been that skilled. This playful insult immediately strikes a nerve with Melissa, who glares at him with sudden irritation and demands to know what he just said. Declaring that she has been going way too easy on him and can no longer hold training urges back, Melissa determinedly wears her jacket, preparing to initiate a wholesome, sparring practice with him right there. After finishing their long night of close combat fighting, the house falls perfectly quiet as morning approaches. Naru lies awake in the gym pit, resting next to a sleeping Melissa. He finds himself reflecting deeply on his new path, wondering if he will be able to perform well as an assistant academy professor given his currently weakened physical state. His anxiety triggers painful memories of how his former family treated him after his downfall. He vividly remembers Ashley coldly telling him to disappear after seeing him in such a defeated state, and other family members sneeringly accusing him of being a scammer who had no right to marry into their family. They had even told him that his poor skills were pathetic, warning him never to try to help others again. Gritting his teeth in frustration at these memories, Naru turns his gaze toward Melissa, who is sleeping peacefully. Looking at her, Naru is deeply moved by the realization that there is still someone who truly trusts and supports him. Despite his current limitations, he makes a firm promise to himself that he will rise again and get back on his feet. As morning sunlight fills the room, Melissa helps Naru wear a jacket, carefully adjusting his necktie. She cheerfully remarks that the neat attire makes him look like a proper professor. Feeling a bit embarrassed but deeply grateful, Naru thanks her for her unwavering support. Melissa brushes off his gratitude, insisting that such a small favor is absolutely nothing. She announces that he is all set and asks if they should head out. Naru agrees, confirming that they should head to the academy. Although everyone deemed him completely useless after his abilities vanished, Naru gazes determinedly at the grand gates of Visdra Academy, ready to start his new life. As Naru takes his first steps through the academy's massive stone archway, his mind is filled with quiet determination. Standing before this new beginning, he resolves to prove his worth once again, relying entirely on his own relentless persistence and hard work to forge a successful path forward. Inside a dimly lit dungeon chamber, a highly skilled warrior named Logan successfully retrieves a mysterious pink bottle, noting that he has finally found the ancient artisan's pheromone perfume. As a hero praised worldwide for his outstanding abilities, Logan sheathes his sword over the remains of a defeated beast and commands his subordinates to prepare for their return, a directive they eagerly follow. Despite his formidable reputation, Logan has always functioned as the second in command, continuously seeking any opportunity to gain the Queen's personal recognition during Naru's ongoing absence. Returning to the castle of the Relit's kingdom, Logan marches confidently through the grand sunlit corridors of the palace. Upon reaching the ornate doors of the inner chambers, he is greeted with a polite bow by a middle-aged maid named Marie, a countess who directly serves the Queen as her closest confidant. Logan offers a smug smile and presents his hard-earned prize, carefully pulling back the protective cloth to reveal the glistening bottle of perfume. Marie gasps in awe, recognizing it immediately as the rare treasure the Queen has been desperately searching for, and promises to deliver it to Her Majesty right away. Seizing the opportunity, a slightly anxious Logan asks Marie how many times the Queen has mentioned his name over the past week. For a knight of the realm, there is no greater honor than having their name praised by the sovereign, as frequent mentions symbolize being the country's ultimate hero. Marie pauses to calculate, recalling that Aquinas was mentioned 4 times and George was mentioned 6 times, while Naru was mentioned a staggering 10 times. Realizing his name has not yet been brought up, Logan listens in dismay as Marie clarifies that the Queen only mentioned him twice, specifically asking if he had taken charge of the request and how long he would take to resolve it. Crestfallen by this news, Logan can only ask in disappointment if his name was truly only mentioned twice. Deeply disappointed, Logan asks Marie if he really didn't receive any compliments from the Queen at all. Marie calmly responds that everyone in the kingdom desires Her Majesty's attention, advising him to simply hope his name comes up more frequently in the following week. This placating advice only infuriates Logan further, and he angrily demands to know how he could possibly calm down under these circumstances. He is incensed by the realization that he is seemingly ranked lower in the Queen's mind than Naru, whom he bitterly refers to as a cripple since his defeat 2 years ago. Hearing his loud and disrespectful outburst, Marie looks at him sternly and quickly warns him to watch his words carefully, reminding him that they are still within the palace grounds. Logan scratches his head in frustration, arguing that because he successfully retrieved the ancient perfume, his name absolutely deserved to be mentioned with much more honor. Marie sighs and, conceding to his persistence, gestures toward the heavy double doors, proposing that they go see the Queen directly. Logan is caught off guard by the sudden opportunity, but as the grand doors creak open, he quickly composes himself, resolving to seize the moment without hesitation. Walking into the magnificent throne room, Logan smiles confidently and bows, introducing himself to the sovereign. It is highly unusual for a knight to visit the Queen alone, and it has been an entire year since Logan last stood in her presence. Sitting elegantly on her couch, Queen Isabella looks over and asks Marie who this man is. Marie leans in to quietly whisper Logan's identity and accomplishments directly into the Queen's ear. Acknowledging the information, Queen Isabella turns her gaze to Logan, realizing he is indeed the one who retrieved the ancient artisan's perfume. Logan bows respectfully, confirming her statement, and is met with a brief, polite compliment as the Queen simply notes his good work and promises to put the perfume to good use. Logan is stunned by the incredibly brief exchange, internally gritting his teeth in bitter resentment over receiving such a minimal acknowledgement. He feels deeply insulted, thinking that he is being treated far worse than Naru. Before he can process his anger, Queen Isabella casually dismisses him, signaling that he may leave. In a desperate bid to keep her attention, Logan raises his voice in protest, calling out to Her Majesty. Desperate to secure the Queen's favor, Logan brings up a rumor he heard, mentioning that Her Majesty has been searching for her mother's lost belongings that fell into the ocean. He passionately promises that if she grants him the opportunity, he will gladly retrieve them, even if it costs him his life. Queen Isabella looks back with mild curiosity, prompting Logan to quickly request a timeline of just 1 month to complete the task. Finding the proposal acceptable, the Queen agrees, promising to reward him generously if he succeeds, and tells him she looks forward to his return. Logan bows deeply in obedience, leaving the chamber with a malicious smirk, confident that this mission will secure her ultimate trust, while Naru remains out of the picture. 1 month later, Back at the palace, Marie delivers the grim news of Logan's death to Queen Isabella. The queen remains entirely unfazed by the tragedy, dryly remarking that he must not have been very skilled after all, before immediately asking if Naru has arrived yet. Marie bows politely, informing her that Naru sent word explaining it would be a bit difficult for him to visit at this time. Meanwhile, back at the academy grounds, Melissa guides Naru through the courtyard, pointing out that she has a meeting to attend in one direction, while the dean's office lies in the opposite direction. Feeling deeply grateful for her constant support, Naru thanks Melissa for all of her help. Melissa warmly dismisses his gratitude, assuring him that it is no trouble at all. Although she playfully admits that she really wants to give him a hug right now, she makes sure he is comfortable heading to his destination alone. Naru smiles and scratches his neck, reassuring her that he is not a child and that she has absolutely nothing to worry about. With a bright smile, Melissa waves goodbye, promising to see him later as she heads off to her meeting. Naru waves back at Melissa with a cheerful smile, calling out for her not to be late. Reflecting on how much vital help he has received from her lately, Naru pumps his fist in quiet determination, resolving to work as hard as he possibly can in his new role. However, as Naru slowly turns and limps away, he is closely observed by a purple-haired student standing nearby. Crossing her arms with a cold and skeptical expression, she lets out a deep sigh of disappointment. Watching his uneven steps, she finds it highly difficult to believe that this fragile, injured man is truly the legendary figure who was once praised as the realm's greatest hero. Back in the majestic setting of Vera's hall, an hourglass slowly drains its last grains of sand. Observing the successful completion of their wager, the goddess Vera praises Naru's resilience, admitting she initially expected him to give up quickly, but he managed to endure the grueling pain until the very end. True to her word, she happily declares that she will lift the curse plaguing the Lafone family and fully restore his legendary warrior powers. Sometime later, Naru is limping through the sunlit grounds of the academy when he suddenly experiences a strange sensation, wondering why his ears feel so itchy. His quiet walk is abruptly interrupted when a sharp voice calls out, ordering him to come over. Turning around, he sees a young man in a brown suit, accompanied by the same purple-haired student who was watching him earlier. Naru approaches them and asks why they called him over. The young man confirms Naru's identity before cheerfully noting that the rumors about him joining the faculty as an assistant professor must indeed be true. He introduces himself as Wigreb, the assistant to Professor Padley. Without warning, Wigreb thrusts a sword toward Naru, asking him to hold it and casually questioning if a former warrior still remembers how to handle a blade. Confused by the sudden weapon, Naru asks why he is being handed a sword so abruptly. Wigreb explains that the young lady beside him, Alicia, has an upcoming swordsmanship examination, so they were hoping to see a quick demonstration of his legendary skills. Naru looks down at his hand tightly gripping his crutch, silently wondering if Wigreb completely lacks common sense for demanding a demonstration from a man who is clearly crippled. Looking highly skeptical, Alicia chimes in to mockingly ask if he is really unable to perform such a basic task, questioning his past status as a hero. Keeping his composure, Naru politely declines, explaining that performing a sword demonstration would be quite difficult for him right now, due to the injured state of his leg. Hearing his polite refusal, Alicia simply lets out an annoyed scoff. Showing complete disinterest in the crippled warrior, Alicia commands Wigreb to hand the sword over to Naru, flatly stating she has no desire to touch it herself. Wigreb tries to present the blade once more, letting out a disappointed sigh at Naru's refusal. Realizing that staying to argue with them will only leave him physically and mentally exhausted, Naru decides to disengage. He offers his sincere apologies, states that he will be taking his leave first, and offers a brief wave as he departs. Alicia watches his retreating figure with her arms tightly crossed, grumbling to herself that he is absolutely no fun. Sometime later, Naru sits inside the president's office, listening to the elderly head of Visdra Academy. The president goes on a lengthy monologue, explaining that the academy's name translates to the wisdom of the dragon, while boasting about the school's prestigious history and long-standing traditions. He expresses incredibly high expectations for Naru's new role, urging him to teach the students well by sharing his real-world warrior experiences. Privately, Naru is completely drained, sweat dropping as he realizes the president has been lecturing him non-stop for over 2 hours. Despite his exhaustion, Naru politely agrees to his instructions before finally being permitted to leave. Stepping out of the office and closing the door behind him, Naru lets out a massive sigh of relief, feeling as though the endless meeting was genuinely going to kill him. He dryly reflects on how high-ranking officials tend to talk excessively, whether in his original home of South Korea or in this fantasy world. Recognizing that his students might already be waiting, he prepares to head to his assigned classroom. As Naru limps down the academy hallways, the rhythmic clatter of his crutch draws immediate, hostile attention. Groups of students begin to whisper among themselves, pointing him out and questioning if the limping man is indeed the famous former hero. They eagerly gossip about his highly publicized divorce and the rumors surrounding his failed marriage, with some declaring they would be far too embarrassed to show their faces in public if they were in his shoes. Others mockingly question his warrior credentials, snidely wondering if a teacher in his physical condition would easily lose in a fight against the students themselves. Hearing the cruel chatter, Naru flinches and quietly clicks his tongue, deeply annoyed by how easily everyone spreads rumors. He thinks to himself that if these students only knew the true, self-sacrificing reason behind his downfall, they would never dare speak of him in such a disrespectful manner. Although the situation is highly upsetting, he remains bound by the terms of his wager with the goddess and cannot defend his reputation, leaving him with no choice but to endure the slander in silence. Steeling his nerves, Naru walks down the quiet corridor toward the classroom for Class RS, the remedial student division, pausing just outside the door with his heart pounding in anticipation. Just outside the classroom door, Naru takes a moment to calm his mind, admitting to himself that he feels a bit nervous before finally stepping inside. As the heavy wooden door swings open, he politely introduces himself and greets the students waiting inside. He is met by 3 students, a white-haired girl covered in bandages named Lydia, a brown-haired girl named Hazley, and an energetic pink-haired girl named Angelina. Lydia is the first to offer a greeting, while Angelina eagerly calls out to him. Stepping forward with a bright smile, Angelina welcomes him to their class and presents him with a flower. Naru accepts the gift with quiet gratitude, feeling slightly flustered but deeply relieved. He reflects that, despite his initial worries, his new students do not seem to have bad personalities at all. To get the lesson started, Naru asks the group to take their seats, prompting Angelina to quickly return to her desk. Standing behind the podium, Naru formally introduces himself as Kang Naru, their new professor in charge for Class RS. He openly addresses his physical condition, explaining that his limp is the direct result of his battle against Vera. While Lydia watches him quietly, Naru offers a sincere apology for instructing them while in such a weakened physical state, but he firmly promises that he will never teach them half-heartedly. As Hazley listens intently, Naru reminds the group that this semester is their absolute last chance to remain at the academy, urging them all to work together and do their best. Angelina quietly resolves to do just that. To reassure them, Naru confidently declares that he will take full responsibility for their education and ensure that every single one of them graduates successfully. Hoping to begin their journey on a personal note, Naru looks over his roster and suggests starting one-on-one consultations, asking if anyone wants to be the first to speak with him. Angelina immediately raises her hand with great enthusiasm, shouting out her eagerness as she leaps up from her desk. Smiling at her high energy, Naru instructs her to bring her chair over to his desk so they can begin, and she happily complies. Naru begins the first consultation by confirming Angelina's name. She proudly responds that she is the young lady of the Mats family, a lineage renowned for its loyalty to the kingdom, having steadfastly guarded its gates for hundreds of years. Trying to guide the conversation back to her studies, Naru asks about her major, and Angelina excitedly reveals that her specialty is water magic, eagerly offering to show him a demonstration right then and there. Surprised, Naru asks if she truly intends to perform it in the classroom, which she enthusiastically confirms. However, her excitement quickly fades into slight embarrassment as she admits she cannot show him anything too grand, explaining that because of her unique constitution, casting even a few simple spells completely drains her of her mana. This makes Naru realize that her exceptionally low mana capacity is likely the reason she was placed in the remedial division. Deciding it is best to avoid unnecessary strain, Naru suggests postponing the magic demonstration for another time and calls for the next student to come forward. The quiet, white-haired girl approaches, and Naru starts by asking for her name, which she reveals is Lydia. Noting her extensive bandages, Naru gently asks if there is something wrong with her physical condition, and Lydia quietly explains that her injuries were caused by a fire. As Naru prepares to write in his notepad, he asks about her specialty, and she briefly replies that it is swordsmanship. Sensing her guarded demeanor, Naru realizes she is quite a prickly individual, a suspicion that is quickly confirmed when Lydia bluntly asks if he also plans to give up on their class and leave them right away. Naru immediately denies this, crossing his arms and assuring her that he has absolutely no intention of doing such a thing. Skeptical of his promise, Lydia retorts that previous instructors lied as well, with everyone quitting after only a few days, and she openly wonders how long it will take before Naru leaves too. As Lydia walks away, Naru recognizes her deeply pessimistic outlook and notes that he will need to build trust and approach her slowly. Turning his attention to the final student, Naru asks for her name, and the brown-haired girl hesitantly looks up, introducing herself as Hazley and sharing that her specialty is alchemy. During their conversation, Hazley suddenly blushes deeply and accuses Naru of looking at her school bag far too blatantly. She crosses her arms tightly, stating her hope that he can view her with the proper perspective of a student rather than a target of attention. Naru is completely dumbfounded by the accusation, sweat dropping in confusion while Hazley continues to breathe heavily, internally calling him incredibly lecherous. Realizing how easily she misinterprets his gaze, Naru silently resolves to be extremely cautious around her from now on. Witnessing this awkward accusation, Angelina stands up abruptly, slamming her hands on her desk, and angrily demands to know why Hazley is calling their new professor a disgrace. Before Hazley can even respond, Angelina snatches her classmate's bag and dumps its contents onto the desk, exposing several highly detailed sussy boxing practice books. Angelina loudly declares that the real disgrace in the room is Hazley herself. Mortified, Hazley calls Angelina a snitch, but Angelina continues her verbal attack, pointing out that Hazley's grades are always low because she is constantly lost in her own wild fantasies. Lydia watches the dramatic scene unfold quietly as Hazley trembles with intense embarrassment and rage. In a desperate bid to make Angelina stop, Hazley grabs a glass flask containing a bubbling red liquid. Though someone yells for her to stop, she loses her grip and the flask goes flying, crashing heavily to the classroom floor where it immediately shatters. The impact triggers a sudden explosion, out of which emerges a fiery element lizard. Angelina screams in terror as she recognizes the creature as a salamander. The fiery beast immediately leaps onto the wooden bookshelves, causing the flames to spread rapidly across the classroom. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Naru calls out to the girls in alarm as the room is quickly engulfed in fire. With his students in immediate danger, he desperately searches for a solution and realizes that the only way to quickly neutralize the threat is to smother the salamander with his own body. He knows that doing so will inevitably leave him severely burned, but despite his limitations, Naru resolves to act, taking a painful, limping step forward to save his students. Determined to protect his students at all costs, Naru decides that it is far better for him to take the brunt of the danger than to let the girls suffer any injuries. With absolute resolve, he throws himself directly over the fiery salamander crawling across the stone floor. Smothering the elemental beast with his own body, Naru braces for the impact of the landing, fully expecting to feel the agony of the burning flames. However, instead of the expected pain of a classroom fire, the scene suddenly transitions to the eastern part of the continent, high in the beautiful green-waste mountain range. Squeezing his eyes shut in confusion, Naru slowly blinks open his eyes and looks around, completely bewildered by what just happened. Rather than a burning room, he finds himself standing on a peaceful, sunlit, grassy hill, left wondering how he could have possibly arrived in such a serene and open place. Looking toward the crest of the hill, Naru notices a large tree where a beautiful, green-haired woman dressed in elegant white fabric is resting. Sensing his presence, the woman turns toward him and gasps in absolute shock. Staring directly at Naru with wide eyes, she calls out to him in complete disbelief, instantly recognizing his face. In their spiritual meeting, the goddess Vera formally admits her defeat, promising to release the curse plaguing the Lapone family and fully restore Naru's legendary strength as agreed. Desperate to return to reality, Naru urgently begs her to hurry, explaining that his students are in immediate danger. Amused by his frantic rushing, Vera warns him that reclaiming his powers might be a somewhat painful experience. Suddenly, Naru is hit by an intense, burning wave of heat, forcing him to summon every ounce of his willpower to endure the agonizing transition. He struggles through the burning sensation, panting heavily as he desperately tries to catch his breath. Once the process is complete, Vera hovers gently down toward him, confirming that she has kept her end of the promise. She then curiously asks Naru how it felt to live his life without any of his legendary powers. Looking up dejectedly, Naru admits that the experience was miserable, explaining that as soon as his abilities vanished, his beloved wife abandoned him without a second thought. Vera notes that being stripped of his status was a known term of their wager, asking if he truly believed things would turn out differently. Naru sighs deeply, admitting he foolishly believed Ashley would love him unconditionally regardless of his state, because of how deeply they had once cared for each other. He bitterly realizes that her attitude shifted completely because she only valued him for his power rather than who he was as a person. Vera listens quietly before offering a knowing smile. Acknowledging the disgraceful behavior of the Lapone family, she decides that Naru deserves some compensation and announces her desire to leave him with a special gift. Extending her hand, she unleashes a bright surge of magical energy toward him. As a crackling aura envelops his body, Naru is left wondering about the strange and powerful sensation coursing through him. With a soft giggle, Vera happily reveals that she has just bestowed a special new power upon him. Before his departure from the spiritual realm, Naru asks Vera what specific power she is talking about, but the goddess floats upward and tells him she has no reason to reveal it, suggesting he find out for himself. With a playful farewell, she promises they will meet another time before vanishing into a blinding flash of light. As his consciousness begins to fade back to reality, Naru is left wondering what kind of new power she could have possibly given him. Suddenly, Naru's consciousness is pulled back to the burning classroom, where he is immediately surrounded by swirling ash and thick, heavy smoke. Nearby, Angelina is on her knees coughing, completely helpless as burning books and heavy debris begin to collapse from the shelves above. Shielding her head, she screams in pure terror as a flaming book drops directly toward her. Spotting the immediate danger, Naru leaps forward, calling out to his students as Angelina desperately cries out for help. Clenching his fist, Naru channels the glowing magical energy suddenly surging through his veins. He instantly casts his signature defense spell, Heaven's Aegis, manifesting a massive golden crest beneath his feet. The protective barrier expands just in time, allowing the falling burning debris to bounce harmlessly away while a terrified Angelina remains completely safe under its protection. Catching his breath, Naru stands amidst the settling dust, realizing with immense relief that his legendary powers have truly returned. Before he can fully process his relief, a loud, angry voice demands to know what all the ruckus is about as the classroom door is thrown open. Someone quickly casts a water spell to extinguish the remaining flames, bringing the chaotic situation to a halt. Sometime later, a stern female faculty member reprimands Naru, pointing out that he has managed to cause a major accident on his very first day of work. Bowing his head apologetically, Naru takes full responsibility, explaining that the disaster was entirely due to his own carelessness. As he stands there dejectedly, the academy president and other staff members whisper judgmentally, warning one another to remain on high guard because they can never know when the troubled students of Class RS might cause another disaster. Following the chaotic incident in the classroom, Naru humbly promises to be much more careful in the future. The senior administrator declares that the rest of the staff can head back, stating her intention to personally instill more discipline into the new instructor. However, the school's president gently intervenes, asking her to be lenient since it is Naru's first day on the job and urging her not to scold him too severely. Conceding to the president's request, the senior staff members decide to take their leave first, leaving Naru alone with the short-haired professor in her office. Once they are left alone, Naru turns to the short-haired professor and apologetically asks if he had spoken too harshly to her earlier. Blushing deeply in surprise, she quickly reassures him that she did not find his words harsh at all. Adjusting his tie, Naru shifts his focus back to the students, mentioning that he needs to go check on Hazley since she was likely the most startled by the entire ordeal. Disappointed by his decision, the short-haired professor looks up at him with pleading eyes, lamenting that she will have to eat dinner all by herself and begging him to stay. Naru gently declines, offering his sincere apologies and explaining that he absolutely must go. This refusal prompts her to cross her arms and pout in pure childish frustration. Finally giving in to his stubbornness, she sighs in resignation. However, as Naru prepares to step out, she suddenly begins to adjust her jacket, showing a sparring trick. Watching his retreating figure, she complains aloud, asking if he is truly going to abandon her new trick. Following another intense encounter, Naru hesitantly asks Melissa if she noticed anything different during their close combat battle compared to their previous encounter. Touching her chin thoughtfully, Melissa blushes and responds that the session felt just as good as last time. She then requests Naru to fetch some tissues for post-workout sweat cleanup, a task that Naru readily agrees to perform. While grabbing the tissues, Naru quietly reflects on his encounter with the goddess Vera, recalling her promise of a special gift and wondering what kind of hidden power he might have actually received. Returning to help Melissa wipe off the remaining sweats from their rigorous hand-to-hand combat practice, Naru is suddenly caught off guard. As he prepares to gently clean her bags, he stops in his tracks, completely stunned to find that all the bruises and muscle strain on her hand from their wholesome 1v1 gaming matches have completely vanished. Highly confused, Naru begins to piece everything together, recalling the goddess Vera's words about granting him a unique power. He suddenly experiences a major realization, understanding that this incredible, rapid recovery and healing ability must be the very gift the goddess bestowed upon him. Noticing Naru standing completely still in deep thought, Melissa curiously asks why he is just standing there. Gathering his thoughts, Naru tells her that they need to talk. Sitting her down, he explains the entire truth about his past wager with the goddess Vera and how he had sacrificed his status for the sake of his ex-wife. Hearing this, Melissa slams her hands on the table in disbelief, furious that Naru had kept such a massive secret to himself and endured so much public mockery all because of a divine gamble. However, her anger quickly shifts to sheer curiosity when Naru mentions his theory that his special power manifests through his recovery elixir. Skeptical but intrigued, Melissa immediately decides to run a spot test, kneeling down to gather his recovery formula so she can see the healing effects for herself. Shortly after applying his specialized post-workout energy potion, Melissa looks at her reflection in a compact mirror, marveling at how incredibly smooth and radiant her skin has become. Naru, sitting nearby as he recovers from the exertion, quietly agrees that her skin looks noticeably healthier. Delighted by the results, Melissa happily declares that she should apply this training formula every single day, leaving Naru sweating in panic as he realizes he might not have enough of his healing elixir to support such a demanding daily training regimen. Meanwhile, far from the academy, gossip spreads through the grand halls of the Lapone family residence. Nobles whisper amongst themselves about the rumors of Naru securing a position as an assistant professor at Visdra Academy, mockingly predicting that the disgraced warrior will undoubtedly be fired in no time. Inside the sitting room, Naru's ex-wife, Ashley, elegantly sips her tea and comments on its pleasant taste, asking her sister-in-law, Serena Lapone, where she managed to acquire it. Serena replies that it is a rare blend called sham tea, which Naru had personally brought back from a far-off nation in the east. Upon hearing his name, Ashley suddenly freezes, holding her teacup in mid-air as a wave of silence washes over her. Annoyed by the mention of her ex-husband, Ashley demands to know why Serena has not yet thrown away the tea Naru brought. Serena defends the beverage, pointing out that it smells and tastes wonderful. Ashley firmly states that she does not want to hear any mention of Naru's name, explaining that since his life is no longer her concern, she prefers to avoid any news about him whatsoever. Their conversation is suddenly interrupted when an aide rushes in to inform Ashley that her mother is urgently searching for her, leaving her startled and wondering what her mother could possibly want. In the mansion's main hall, Ashley finds her mother, Michelle Lapone, holding a bottle of wine in deep frustration. Michelle complains that the wine tastes completely different from what she is used to, demanding to know how it was stored. Ashley's sweat drops nervously, admitting that Naru was always in charge of organizing the wine cellar, so she has no idea how he managed to preserve the quality. This only infuriates Michelle further, who angrily declares that it has been 2 weeks since Naru left, and they must adapt to managing the estate themselves. She bitterly remarks that all of their current domestic problems seem to stem from his absence, sighing in deep regret that she should have kept him as a slave if she had known his departure would cause so much disruption. Ashley can only look down in silent dejection, feeling a growing wave of unease. The scene transitions back to the academy, where Naru walks up to the temporary outdoor classroom tent. Lifting the flap to greet his students, he is warmly met by Angelina, who waves enthusiastically and wishes him a very good morning. Naru smiles and asks how they are doing as he steps inside with his teaching materials. Looking around the tent, he notices that while Lydia is present at her desk, Hazley's seat remains completely empty. Puzzled by her absence, Naru scratches his head and asks the remaining girls if anyone knows the reason behind Hazley's absence. Angelina responds hesitantly, suggesting that Hazley's absence is likely due to the highly sussy incident that occurred the previous day. Listening closely, Naru quietly agrees, remembering how Angelina had publicly exposed Hazley's sussy books. Realizing that such deep humiliation would indeed explain why she skipped class, Naru resolves to pay Hazley a visit to check on her well-being once he finishes his work shift for the day. However, at that exact moment, Naru remains completely unaware of what lies ahead, having no expectation that Hazley is about to present him with an incredibly bizarre request. Naru gets ready for the first class of the day, announcing that it is time for their lecture on nature and fairy tales with Professor Madilak. He reminds the students to grab their textbooks and prepare to head out. Angelina immediately raises her hand with immense enthusiasm, declaring that she is already fully prepared to leave. However, Naru asks her to wait a moment, turning his attention to Lydia to ask if she is also ready to depart. Lydia rests her chin on her bandaged hand and flatly refuses to go, stating her intention to remain right there in the tent. Taken aback, Naru asks how she expects to handle the lecture, prompting Angelina to let out a tired sigh. Angelina explains that Lydia rarely attends any of her classes, choosing instead to spend the entire day sleeping before simply heading home. Determined to fulfill his role, Naru firmly instructs Lydia to stand up and join them, but she stubbornly refuses. Realizing he cannot force her at this moment, Naru sighs in defeat, telling Lydia to make sure she attends the subsequent lecture before guiding Angelina out of the tent. As they walk across the academy grounds, Angelina suddenly notices something different and asks Naru why he is no longer using his crutch. Naru calmly explains that the crutch was merely a temporary aid for his recovery, and he is now doing completely fine. Delighted by the news, Angelina warmly expresses her happiness for his recovery, prompting a grateful smile from Naru as he thanks her for her kind support. By 6 in the evening, Naru is sitting inside Melissa's office, diligently finishing up his paperwork. Letting out a weary sigh, he notes with relief that his long first day of teaching has finally come to an end. Glancing at the ticking clock on the wall, he decides that it is finally time to check on his missing student and resolves to head straight over to Hazley's house. Arriving at the gates of Hazley's massive family estate, Naru is greeted by a housemaid who politely asks for his identity. He introduces himself as Assistant Professor Kang Naru from Visdra Academy, prompting the maid to warmly invite him inside. As Naru walks through the grand courtyard, he is deeply impressed by the sheer scale of the massive mansion. Once inside, Naru sits down to speak with Hazley's mother. Looking deeply worried, she explains that her daughter has locked herself away and refuses to leave her room. She then suggests that if Naru is comfortable, he should head up to Hazley's room to speak with her directly. Naru readily agrees, quietly reflecting on how heavily the young girl must be blaming herself for the chaotic accident from the previous day. Standing outside the decorated blue door, Naru knocks gently before sliding it open, announcing that he has come out of concern and is stepping inside for a moment. Inside the lavish room, Hazley remains completely hidden under a massive pile of blankets on her bed. Naru asks if she plans to return to the academy the next day, mentioning that Angelina actually wants to apologize to her. From beneath the sheets, a muffled, angry voice accuses him of lying, declaring that Angelina is absolutely not the type of person to apologize. Seeing that gentle persuasion is failing, Naru crosses his arms and prepares to use a different tactic. Pulling out her academic records, he warns her that if she continues to hide, he will have no choice but to use another method, pointing out that her grades used to be quite good before she got so invested in her private jujitsu training book collection. Hearing his provocative words, a mortified Hazley instantly flings off her blankets, blushing furiously as she demands to know what he is talking about. In her embarrassment, she hurls a pillow directly at his face, screaming for him to get out of her room. Calmly catching the pillow, Naru agrees to leave as requested, but playfully adds that he will simply go discuss the sudden drop in her grades with her mother instead. Terrified of her mother finding out about her secret collection, Hazley springs out of bed and races across the floor, spreading her arms wide to block the doorway. Clad in her jacket, she frantically commands him to stop, asking if he has completely lost his mind. Naru humorously points out that Hazley had just ordered him to leave her room. Hazley, feeling cornered, dramatically asks if he wants to see her perish from sheer embarrassment right there on the spot. Sensing his advantage, Naru offers a compromise, promising not to reveal her secret collection to her mother as long as she agrees to return to the academy the following day. Desperate to keep her secret safe, Hazley quickly capitulates, stating that she will indeed go to class. Satisfied with her answer, Naru starts to head out, waving a casual goodbye as he reminds her once more to make sure she attends class tomorrow. Just as Naru prepares to step out of the room, Hazley suddenly reaches out and grabs a tight hold of his clothing, pleading with him to wait. Naru turns around in confusion, wondering what could be wrong. Looking down with a deep blush, Hazley hesitantly asks if he would be willing to stay and hear her out for just a moment before he leaves. Seeing her genuine distress, Naru takes a seat on a nearby sofa, crossing his legs and agreeing to listen to whatever is currently on her mind. Sitting across from him, Hazley explains that she would normally never speak openly about such highly personal matters. However, because Naru went through the trouble of coming all the way to her house to check on her, she decides to make an exception. With a nervous blush, she confesses that she believes she has developed a serious addiction to her sussy hand-to-hand combat books. She explains that this habit has caused her to constantly have highly proper thoughts, leaving her completely unable to focus on her regular studies. Hearing this, Naru looks on with growing concern, realizing that her struggle to concentrate on her education is a far more serious issue than he had initially assumed. Gathering her courage, Hazley curls up on the sofa and hugs her knees tightly, admitting that Naru is actually the main reason she skipped school today. When a bewildered Naru wonders why his presence would cause her to stay home, Hazley shyly confesses that she has actually harbored deep feelings of admiration for him ever since his days as a legendary warrior. She explains that she felt far too humiliated to face him at school after having her special hobbies so publicly exposed in front of someone she respected so deeply. Feeling a bit flustered by her unexpected confession, Naru scratches his head in embarrassment, pointing out that he is no longer a glamorous hero but merely a struggling, divorced man. However, Hazley gently reassures him, looking down with a warm blush, as she states that, in her eyes, he remains just as cool as he was in his glorious past. Hazley awkwardly points out that Naru must have spent a great deal of competitive 1v1 training with his former wife, leaving a flustered Naru to only offer a hesitant, unsure agreement. Realizing the sudden awkwardness of her statement, Hazley immediately panics and apologizes for bringing up such a delicate topic out of nowhere. Clutching her chest in embarrassment, she confesses that she struggles with distracting, sussy thoughts whenever she is around him, and she deeply regrets asking such a question. Listening quietly, Naru reflects on her dilemma. He realizes that since she had the courage to open up to him about her struggles, he cannot simply brush her concerns aside. Holding his chin thoughtfully, he tells himself that there must be something he can do to help his student focus on her academy responsibilities once again. Before he can propose a solution, Hazley quietly calls out to her professor, blushing deeply as she sits on the couch. She hesitantly asks if he would be open to hearing about what she truly wants from him. Naru warmly encourages Hazley to go ahead and tell him what is on her mind. Hesitating slightly, Hazley blushes and takes a deep breath before asking if he would be willing to show her his blade. This highly unexpected request leaves Naru completely stunned and flustered, struggling to process what she just asked. Hazley explains that while she has read plenty about a warrior's bag items in her books, she has never actually seen it in person, leaving her incredibly curious to know what it looks like in real life. Naru immediately tries to shut down the idea, gently reminding her that she is his student, meaning such a demonstration is entirely out of the question. However, Hazley eagerly counter-argues, pointing out that Naru is the only man she trusts enough to ask about such matters. This leaves Naru in a difficult position, prompting him to wonder if agreeing to her request would actually help her focus during class. Looking for a way to motivate her academically while proving to the school administration that he can successfully guide his students, Naru proposes a deal. He tells her that if she manages to score full marks on her upcoming test, he will agree to her terms. Hazley's face instantly lights up with excitement, and she joyfully holds him to his word, warning him that he absolutely cannot back out of their promise later. With a weary sigh, Naru agrees to the deal, but firmly requests that she keep their arrangement an absolute secret from everyone else. Hazley reassures him that she has no intention of gossiping about such a matter, turning around to prove her sincerity. To ease his worries, Hazley opens her drawer and retrieves a small bottle containing a purple liquid. She explains that the potion is designed to prevent anyone who drinks it from speaking to others about the conversations they shared. Recognizing the rare formula as Doabus secretum, Naru is deeply impressed and asks how she managed to obtain such a rare item. When Hazley proudly reveals that she brewed the difficult potion herself, Naru looks on with a mix of surprise and mild concern, wondering if she accidentally added any unusual ingredients to the mixture. Seeing Naru's hesitation, Hazley teasingly remarks that he seems to have very little faith in her abilities. Without wasting any time, she uncorks the bottle and eagerly chugs down the purple liquid, much to his astonishment. Stunned by her sudden action, Naru is left momentarily speechless before calling out in alarm, warning her not to consume an unknown potion so rapidly. Hazley simply wipes her mouth, showing a flushed expression, and confidently tells her professor that it is now his turn to drink. Though slightly apprehensive, Naru looks at the bottle and convinces himself that since she drank it safely, he should be fine to do the same. Holding out her hand, Hazley watches as Naru drinks the remaining liquid. Instantly, a massive, glowing magic crest activates on the floor beneath their feet, enveloping both of them in a brilliant mystical light. As the magical aura settles, Hazley notes with satisfaction that their agreement and conversation are now locked away as a secure, binding secret. Relieved that the spell was successful, Naru reminds Hazley that she must fulfill her end of the bargain by attending classes at the academy from now on. To his utter shock, Hazley immediately rejects the idea, casually stating that she has no intention of going to school. A flustered Naru quickly points out that she had just promised to focus on her studies. Hazley playfully defends her logic, clarifying that she only promised to get good grades on her exams, not that she would actually attend the lectures. She adds that it feels rather unfair for her to put in all the academic effort on her own, suggesting a competitive 1v1 fight with him instead. Looking highly flushed, she stands before him with a deeply infatuated expression. Letting out an exhausted sigh, Naru calls out her name in sheer exasperation. In a final attempt to negotiate, Hazley promises to actually show up at the academy tomorrow if he agrees to give her a quick demonstration right now, proposing that they participate in a friendly battle if she successfully earns full marks on her test. However, Naru firmly rejects her offer, flatly stating that such a plan is absolutely not going to work. Hazley firmly threatens to skip class tomorrow if Naru refuses to show her what she wants. Hoping to salvage the situation, Naru tries to negotiate, promising to consider her request only if she honors her commitment to show up at school first. However, Hazley remains stubborn, flatly refusing to attend class under those conditions, and sitting back down in defiance. Crossing his arms in frustration, Naru warns her that he cannot tolerate this behavior, but Hazley simply pleads with him, expressing how desperately she wants a quick demonstration. Realizing he cannot let his student push him around, Naru decides to take control of the situation, grabbing her arm, asking if this is enough to satisfy her curiosity. The sudden trick leaves a deeply blushing Hazley, completely flustered, softly calling out to her professor in shock. Looking down at her, Naru firmly states that since he has given in to her demands, she is now strictly obligated to show up at the academy tomorrow. Completely overwhelmed by his gesture, Hazley's face flushes bright red, and she eagerly agrees to his terms. Having successfully resolved the matter, Naru bids her goodbye and departs from the estate. Walking through the quiet night streets, he lets out a heavy sigh of relief, silently hoping that after everything he went through, she will actually keep her promise to attend class tomorrow. The next morning, Naru arrives at the academy to prepare for his duties. He is soon joined by his close comrade Melissa, who smiles warmly and asks if he remembers their conversation from the previous day. Naru sheepishly admits that she had certainly driven her point home, prompting Melissa to grab his tie while playfully warning him not to distribute his personal high-protein shakes to just anyone. Showing him a playful trick, Melissa bids Naru goodbye, waving cheerfully and letting him know she will see him later. Transitioning over to the outdoor classrooms on the academy grounds, Naru begins his morning routine by opening his attendance book to call the roll. When he calls out Angelina's name, the enthusiastic girl immediately raises her hand with a bright smile, confirming her presence. He then calls out to Lydia, who remains characteristically quiet, acknowledging him with a silent nod. Finally, Naru calls for Hazley, who responds with an incredibly cheerful tone while playfully gesturing from her desk. Looking on with a sweat drop, Naru can only stare in disbelief at her sudden academic enthusiasm, quietly realizing that if she maintains this level of motivation, she might actually qualify for a sparring round by the end of the day. At the academy's outdoor training hall, Melissa gathers her students to announce that today's lesson will focus on practicing parrying techniques with their weapons. However, when she asks for a volunteer to go first, the entire group shrinks back in fear, leaving Melissa to wonder why no one is stepping forward. A terrified boy wearing glasses sweat drops, hesitantly asking if they will surely perish if they attempt to spar with her. Laughing off his concerns, Melissa playfully pulls the nervous student close, reassuring him that she intends to go easy on him and urging him to stop dawdling and face her. Trembling with anxiety, the boy reluctantly steps forward to prepare his defense. Armed with a large, decorated white shield, the student braces himself as Melissa draws her sword to demonstrate the lesson. She instructs the class to watch closely, explaining that parrying is an essential combat skill because it deflects attacks and successfully throws an opponent off balance. She warns the boy that she is about to unleash a wave of sword energy on the count of 3, which he must deflect using his shield. Shaking behind his heavy shield, the boy nervously confirms he is ready as Melissa takes a firm stance. Counting down, she braces herself to strike, while the terrified student tightly grips his defense as they reach the final count of 3. With a powerful swing of her blade, Melissa unleashes a brilliant crescent wave of blue energy across the training ground. The magical wave surges directly toward the student's shield, prompting Melissa to quickly instruct him to adjust his angle so he can safely bounce the energy away. However, before the instruction can be fully executed, a massive explosion echoes across the arena, sending a giant cloud of dust and debris flying into the sky. The smoke slowly clears to reveal the nervous student slumped against a heavily cracked wall, covered in dirt and soot. Staring at the massive impact from a distance, Melissa is left completely bewildered, wondering how such a catastrophic result occurred. She reflects on her own attack, realizing that she certainly had not intended to use enough power to completely knock over a student. She notes with surprise that her body has felt remarkably light since this morning, with her internal mana appearing to have suddenly increased by roughly 50%. While the other students rush over to help their bruised classmates stand up, Melissa remains lost in deep thought, trying to understand the source of her sudden power surge. She tells herself that she had not done anything unusual recently, apart from her intensive, late-night one-on-one match with Naru, which had concluded with a specialized post-workout formula. She wonders if her sudden massive boost in mana and strength is the direct result of Naru's highly potent special elixir, realizing that his specialized assets might do far more than simply rejuvenate her skin. Meanwhile, inside the temporary classroom tent, Naru closes his book and officially concludes the day's lecture. Because of the chaotic fire caused by the salamander incident the previous day, the school administration had sentenced Hazley to a week of community service as punishment. Naru instructs the class that Hazley will need to stay behind to fulfill her duties, thanking the students for their hard work. Angelina cheerfully wishes him well before departing. At her desk, Hazley wears a deeply sussy grin, waiting for the others to leave. As Naru stands near the exit peeking through the tent curtains, Hazley suddenly slips into the area with a sweet, affectionate greeting. A flustered Naru quickly backs away in alarm, nervously asking what she is doing and reminding her of the immediate danger of being seen by others. Clutching Naru's arm, Hazley teasingly asks if he remembers their special arrangement for today. A weary Naru confirms that he remembers, asking her to please release his arm. Hazley happily complies and lets go with a cheerful confirmation, leaving Naru to let out an exasperated sigh as he prepares to supervise her required community service. They travel to a village farm plot where a local resident warmly thanks Naru for their assistance. While Naru watches over the field, he notes that Hazley looks surprisingly excited to help, diligently digging the soil in her light athletic wear. Upon successfully completing her tasks, Hazley wipes the sweat from her forehead and cheerfully announces to her professor that she is completely finished. Naru commends her hard work and gently calls her over to his side. Hazley asks if they are heading straight back to the academy, but Naru observes how heavily she has been sweating and suggests that she go wash up first. When she wonders where she is supposed to go, Naru advises her to clean up at a nearby inn. Hazley is absolutely thrilled, celebrating the fact that this will be her very first time visiting an inn, and eagerly asks if her professor will be accompanying her. Naru awkwardly confirms that he will indeed be going as well. Hazley cheekily wonders if he has ever visited a gym with a female partner before, prompting Naru to ask if she ever thinks about anything other than training programs. He quickly explains that during his past life as an adventurer, he frequently had to stay at the local gym, warning her not to get any highly imaginative training ideas in her head. Hazley playfully agrees to behave, her heart fluttering with excitement as they arrive at a cozy, rustic village gym just as the evening sky begins to darken. Inside the gym's private quarters, the sound of running water echoes from the bath. Naru sits quietly on a wooden bench, wrapped in a simple jacket as he waits. Moments later, the door creaks open, and a warm, steamy mist fills the room as Hazley steps out, drying her hair with a small cloth while wrapped securely in a t-shirt, remarking on how refreshing her wash was. Hazley sits close to him on the bench, leaning in to eagerly ask if he is finally ready to display his holy sword as promised. Clutching his arm, she urges him to hurry, admitting that her curiosity is driving her wild. Naru offers a hesitant, slightly reluctant agreement, though he silently questions the ethics of sharing his assets with one of his own students. Standing up with his back turned, Naru firmly warns her that he is strictly going to show her his iron staff and nothing more, instructing her not to harbor any alternative ideas. As he hesitatingly begins to open his bag, Naru confesses to himself that he feels incredibly embarrassed now that the moment has actually arrived. Hazley giggles softly at his hesitation, teasingly asking if her formidable professor is suddenly feeling shy. To prove her own commitment to their deal, Hazley declares that she has no choice but to participate fully, dropping her bag to the floor. Smiling sussily, she confidently notes that they have both shed their training gear, making it absolutely impossible for him to back out of their highly anticipated boxing round now. Later that evening, as night settles over the inn, Hazley steps outside only to find her legs shivering and trembling uncontrollably. Noticing her visible exhaustion, a concerned Naru gently asks if she is doing all right, to which Hazley weakly responds that her legs are shaking. Supporting her back to keep her steady, Naru asks if she will truly be capable of walking all the way back to her estate. Hazley weakly reassures him that she will be fine. Looking down with a regretful expression, Naru apologetically notes that their initial joint-friendly battle may have been a bit too rigorous for her very first time, quietly wishing he had held back his strength more. However, Hazley quickly reassures her professor, smiling warmly as she states that she thoroughly enjoyed their session and begs him not to worry. Relieved by her words, Naru chuckles softly, advising her to make sure she gets plenty of rest once she arrives home. Back inside her family's magnificent estate, the night grows late. Inside her room, Hazley sits diligently at her desk under a warm lamp, studying her textbooks with deep focus. Remembering her solemn promise to her professor, she smiles with quiet determination, resolving to do her best. She vows to secure a top score on next week's exam, driven entirely by the sweet motivation of earning even more sparring rounds with him in the future. While walking across the academy grounds, Naru is suddenly called out to by a young messenger. He recognizes her as the errand girl from the local adventurer guild, silently wondering why she has traveled all the way to the school to find him. Stepping forward, the girl presents Naru with a sealed envelope, explaining that Olivia, the guildmaster, had requested her to deliver the message personally. Opening the letter, Naru is surprised to read a formal congratulatory message confirming that his official adventurer license has been restored. The errand girl adds that she was also instructed to request his presence at the guild house. Reflecting on his schedule, Naru realizes he has a bit of free time before the student's next exam begins, concluding that visiting the guild now would not cause any issues. Delighted by his compliance, the young messenger happily invites him to follow her. Together, they arrive at the grand estate of the Thunderfield Guild House. Stepping through the heavy doors, Naru looks around the entrance hall and asks about Olivia's current whereabouts. The messenger politely requests him to wait a moment while she goes to ask around, and Naru extends his thanks as she departs. Moments later, the rhythmic sound of footsteps approaches, and the guildmaster, Olivia, greets him with a welcoming smile. Expressing her delight at seeing him after such a long time, Olivia notes with amazement that the rumors about his recovery are indeed true, observing that he is no longer limping. Naru scratches his neck awkwardly, confirming her observation with a modest laugh. Pulling out a set of official documents, Olivia asks if he would be willing to accept a highly important mission requested by the queen. When a surprised Naru asks for details regarding the sovereign's request, Olivia explains that the mission involves locating the lost belongings of the queen's late mother, a request that had been made long ago. She gently encourages him to accept the task, pointing out that it is rather awkward for the guild to continuously turn down the crown's requests, and suggesting it would be a highly suitable first commission to mark his official return to active duty. Now that Naru has successfully regained his legendary strength, he reflects that taking on guild commissions once again would be a highly practical move. He readily agrees to the proposal, asking the guildmaster, Olivia, when he should officially begin. However, before he sets off to retrieve the target, Olivia points out that he must first secure the sea princess's skin armor. Naru is momentarily puzzled by the mention of this unique artifact, prompting Olivia to explain that since the late queen's belongings are resting at the bottom of the sea, he will need specialized gear alongside the assistance of a warp mage. She describes the legendary armor as an exceptional diving suit of unparalleled quality, originally crafted by an ancient prince from the body of a mermaid princess, which will allow its wearer to move and operate with complete efficiency deep underwater. She warns him that a horde of formidable undead warriors stands watch over the armor, advising him to exercise extreme caution during his pursuit. Naru thoughtfully considers this warning and acknowledges the danger, indicating that he understands the risks. Satisfied with their discussion, Olivia bids him a cheerful farewell, announcing her intention to deliver the update directly to the sovereign. The scene then shifts to the grand palace of the Relics Kingdom, where inside the luxurious chambers, Queen Isabella is relaxing on her couch. Her quiet rest is interrupted by her trusted confidant, Marie, who brings important news. As Isabella looks up with interest, Marie bows respectfully and delivers the highly anticipated update that the legendary hero Naru has fully recovered and officially accepted her royal request. The news completely catches Queen Isabella off guard, causing her to bolt upright in pure shock and inadvertently knock over her bowl of grapes. Eagerly asking if the report is truly genuine, she quickly notices her guards staring in astonishment and blushes deeply in embarrassment over her uncharacteristic outburst. Quickly clearing her throat to regain her composure, she asks if there is any other news to report. Marie politely confirms that there is, sharing a more serious development that palace intelligence units have recently detected highly suspicious movements from the Lapone family. Upon hearing the intelligence report, Queen Isabella processes the news about the Lapone family. She immediately realizes that this is the very family belonging to Naru's ex-wife Ashley. Wanting to ensure her own interests are protected, Isabella commands Marie to make absolutely certain that the Lapone family does not interfere with her royal request. Marie bows in understanding and promises to see to it as the night sky slowly takes over. Under a glowing full moon, a carriage arrives at the edge of a quiet lake. The head of the Lapone family, wearing a thick blindfold to protect himself from his water-induced seizures, stands on the shore accompanied by a loyal housemaid. She gently informs her lord that they have arrived directly in front of the lake, prompting him to instruct her to remove his blindfold. As she reaches up to wear his t-shirt, she hesitates for a moment and politely asks if she may ask him a question. When the lord prompts her to speak, the maid points out that this is already the third time they have traveled to this secluded spot, asking if there is a specific reason why he refuses to give up. The lord quietly responds that he has something he deeply believes in, though he firmly requests that she finish removing the blindfold first. The maid complies, allowing him to face the open water. As the blindfold comes off, he reflects on the long years he spent studying in a desperate bid to find a way to break his family's historical curse. Throughout his research, he eventually discovered that the goddess Vera has a fondness for gambling. When Naru had returned from his battle completely broken and weakened, the lord immediately deduced that the warrior's downfall was actually the result of a secret bet made with the goddess. Though he knew Naru was suffering immensely, the head of the family admitted to himself that lifting their ancestral curse was far too urgent to waste time worrying about the hero's personal pain. Looking out over the shimmering water, he He recalls how he felt when he recently heard the news of Naru's powers returning, which had filled him with absolute certainty that the high-stakes bet with Vera was finally resolved. Standing by the lake without experiencing any ill effects, tears of relief stream down his face. Overcome with gratitude, he opens his arms wide and rejoices, realizing that Naru had truly succeeded in lifting the ancient curse once and for all. Meanwhile, back inside the luxurious Lapone estate, Serena rushes into the sitting room in a state of high agitation. She loudly asks the others if they have already heard the shocking news from their father, specifically regarding his declaration that Naru was the one responsible for successfully lifting their family's curse. Her announcement is met by Naru's ex-wife, Ashley, who is elegantly sipping her tea. Ashley calmly admits that she has indeed heard the rumors, confessing that she previously dismissed Naru as a complete good-for-nothing, finding it incredibly hard to believe that he was actually capable of achieving such a monumental feat. However, as the weight of the realization settles in, Ashley is overcome with a sudden wave of anxiety, looking down in deep dejection as she realizes that they probably should have never gotten divorced. The family relative in the green dress grows increasingly anxious about their situation, wondering if they are bound to face serious trouble at this rate, and suggesting that they should simply find a way to make it seem as though the divorce never even occurred. However, Serena quickly shoots down this naive proposal. Crossing her arms in frustration, she scolds her relative for the foolish idea, pointing out that this is a major dilemma that absolutely cannot be resolved unless Naru himself consents to the arrangement. Hearing her sister-in-law's concerns, Ashley merely lets out a confident smirk, quietly questioning whether Naru's cooperation is actually necessary. Looking up from her teacup with a smug and relaxed expression, she questions why their family would ever need society's formal validation or approval. She dismisses the obstacles entirely, firmly believing that at the end of the day, it is nothing but money and power that truly govern and drive the world. A few hours later, in a high-end district of the city, a quiet meeting takes place inside a private room of a fancy restaurant. Seated around a dinner table are Ashley, her mother Michelle, and the influential high priest of the realm. Hoping to rectify their previous actions, Michelle bows her head humbly and assures the high priest that her daughter is deeply remorseful for what transpired. She earnestly begs him to show mercy just this once and grant leniency in his judgment of their situation. The high priest thoughtfully holds his glass of wine, noting that it is normally quite difficult to alter a formal decree that has already been officially enacted. Joining the plea, Ashley bows her head in apparent distress, tearfully apologizing for her past immaturity and begging for his forgiveness. The high priest looks on solemnly, reminding her that reversing such a decision is a highly delicate matter, as anything officially declared in the name of the gods is considered absolute and unchangeable, a fact she should have already been well aware of. However, his stern demeanor quickly shifts as he raises his glass, casually remarking that for a man of his high standing and authority, pulling off such a task is actually not difficult at all. With a knowing look, he promises to assist them just this once, noting that he is willing to help since he is receiving something highly valuable in return. Feeling a wave of immense relief, Ashley wipes away a tear and expresses her deep gratitude, claiming that she has spent a great deal of time reflecting on her actions throughout this entire ordeal. As they step outside the establishment into the cool night air, Michelle warmly thanks the high priest for his company over dinner. She dismisses the cost of the lavish meal as a minor gesture, smoothly mentioning that she also happens to have a substantial sum of money prepared as a donation to his temple, politely requesting that he accept the contribution. The high priest offers a polite chuckle, playfully claiming that he had not expected such a generous gesture, though Michelle insists that it is merely a proper offering for the gods and urges him to put the funds to good use. Preparing to depart, Michelle requests that the high priest take care of handling Naru's side of the matter. Stepping up into his carriage, the high priest reassures her, stating that he will personally head to the courthouse to officially withdraw the divorce proceedings. With the arrangement successfully secured, Ashley and her mother bow deeply in respect as the carriage begins to carry the high-ranking official away into the night. Filled with profound gratitude, Ashley repeatedly thanks her mother, Michelle, for her swift intervention. Michelle smiles warmly, dismissing her daughter's praise and confidently pointing out that such a feat is nothing major, as anything can be easily accomplished when one possesses sufficient money and power. The following day at the grand estate of the Lapone family, the peaceful atmosphere is suddenly shattered when Serena runs to find Michelle in a complete state of panic. Trembling as she delivers an official letter, she frantically questions how such an unexpected outcome could have occurred. Michelle, stunned by her daughter's distress, opens the envelope to find a formal document from the courthouse. The letter clearly states that the uncontested divorce proceedings remain completely valid, noting that if either party still desires a split, the marriage will proceed to be officially annulled after 1 year. Serena looks on in dismay, realizing that their request to withdraw the divorce was flatly rejected. She immediately shifts the blame to Naru, confidently declaring that he must have anticipated their plans and made the first move to block their attempt. However, the true reason behind the rejection had unfolded the previous night. Immediately after finishing his lavish dinner with Ashley and Michelle, the high priest had set out to fulfill his promise of withdrawing the divorce proceedings. But as he walked through the grand temple halls, his attention was drawn to a rolled scroll left specifically for him on a marble pedestal. Opening the mysterious message, his eyes widened in sheer terror as he read the contents. The letter was a direct warning, stating that the queen herself was closely monitoring Sir Naru's divorce proceedings and was highly anticipating a wise and correct judgment from the church. The realization that Queen Isabella was personally involved left the high priest trembling violently with sweat dripping down his face, as he instantly understood that this was a royal matter far too dangerous for him to dare interfere with. Meanwhile, back at the busy city square, Naru prepares to embark on his mission. Thanks to the assistance of the guildmaster, a warp magician has been arranged to help him carry out the queen's critical request. Sitting quietly on a bench near the fountain, Naru spots a figure approaching and tentatively calls out to greet her. Before him stands a young woman in a deep purple dress and a large pointed witch hat, clutching a wooden staff. A label identifies her as the warp magician, Sophia. Observing her pale complexion and dark circles, Naru quietly notes that she does not appear to be in particularly good physical condition. Trying to gauge her magical capabilities, Naru hesitantly asks how many kilometers she is capable of warping them. Looking quite exhausted, Sophia clutches her staff tightly and responds that her maximum warp range is up to 170 kilometers. Sophia acknowledges that Naru had initially requested a warp magician with a range of at least 200 kilometers, but explains that the guildmaster assured her that her limit would be adequate for this mission. Naru quietly accepts this explanation, though he secretly worries that a 170-kilometer limit is cutting the distance incredibly close. Sophia then prepares to cast her spell, confirming with Naru that their target destination is indeed the Nidara forest. Once Naru verifies that this is correct, Sophia gets ready to channel her magic. Taking a deep breath to concentrate, Sophia tightly grips her wooden staff as a bright green aura begins to envelop her. Channeling her mana, she successfully opens a swirling vortex of green warp magic directly in front of them. With the gateway fully established, she turns to Naru to ask if they should proceed, and he quietly agrees, stepping forward alongside her into the magical portal. The scene transitions to the dense and misty depths of the Nidara forest, where tall, imposing trees stretch high into the sky. Looking around, Naru observes their new surroundings and confirms that they have successfully reached their destination. Looking slightly apprehensive, Sophia clutches her staff and asks if Naru actually knows the way or which direction they need to take. Naru gestures toward a faint trail ahead, explaining that there is a path they can follow. He remembers hearing rumors that the legendary armor is hidden behind the powerful defensive barriers of an ancient royal palace. Realizing this, Naru activates his specialized sensory ability, his eye flashing with a golden light as he scans the dark forest. Spotting a faint magical signature shining through the trees, he confidently informs Sophia that he has successfully located the target and urges her to follow him. An hour later, the pair arrives at a specific location deep within the dark woods. Looking around nervously, Sophia hesitatingly asks if this is indeed the correct spot. Naru confirms that it is, explaining that he can clearly perceive the magical barrier hiding the ancient palace right before them. Understanding the danger ahead, Naru advises Sophia to find a safe place to hide while he goes inside to retrieve the armor. Clutching his shoulder in concern, Sophia anxiously asks how long she will need to remain hidden. Naru looks back at her calmly, admitting that while he cannot give an exact time, he believes it should not take him very long to finish the task. Agreeing to the plan, Sophia decides to hide behind a nearby large boulder, requesting that Naru give her a whistle once he has successfully completed the task. Naru reassures her, promising to finish up and return as quickly as possible. Peeking out from behind her hiding spot, Sophia quietly agrees and watches him prepare to face the unknown dangers. Steeling his resolve, Naru begins to walk down the path leading into the heart of the barrier. However, as his boots step further past the threshold, a dark purple haze begins to rise from the ground, swirling around his feet. He suddenly stops in his tracks, intuitively sensing that a hostile presence is lurking nearby, just as a dark shadow descends upon him. Without warning, a massive glowing scythe sweeps through the air, wielded by a terrifying skeletal guardian cloaked in black with glowing purple eyes. Recognizing the threat, Naru swiftly channels his magical powers to summon his weapons. Invoking his Lancer-class abilities, a bright light manifests in his hands, conjuring a sharp sword and a long spear to face the undead protector. The skeletal guardian strikes with immense force, but Naru calmly blocks the heavy scythe with his sword. Stunned by the warrior's reflexes, the undead guardian expresses surprise that a human could successfully halt its attack. But before the skeleton can react, Naru takes the offensive, catching the Guardian completely off guard. With a swift and powerful swing, Naru unleashes a brilliant wave of blue energy. The devastating counterstrike lands directly on the skeletal Guardian, sending it crashing backward into a massive explosion of smoke and dust. As the rubble settles, the heavily damaged Guardian struggles to sit up, coughing through the haze and frantically demanding to know who he is. Resting his sword casually over his shoulder, Naru looks down at his defeated opponent, dryly questioning if the Guardian is truly asking about his identity. Looking down at his defeated opponent, Naru introduces himself simply and calmly as the warrior. Standing victorious over the defeated Guardian, Naru demands that the creature guide him directly to the chamber where the armor crafted from the mermaid princess is currently being kept. Trembling in absolute terror at the realization that he is facing the legendary warrior, the skeletal Guardian reluctantly agrees to his demands, realizing it stands no chance of resistance. Led deeper into the ancient palace ruins, Naru eventually reaches a hidden chamber, where a securely sealed treasure chest sits upon a stone pedestal, glowing with a soft blue light. Approaching the pedestal, Naru lifts the lid to find the legendary sea princess's skin armor shimmering brilliantly inside. Smiling with satisfaction, he carefully retrieves the glowing artifact, noting that his task is complete and all that remains is for him to safely exit the ruins. Meanwhile, back outside, Sophia remains crouched behind the large boulder. As time slowly ticks away, she begins to grow increasingly anxious, clutching her wooden staff tightly while worrying about when Naru will return. She nervously wonders if he has run into unexpected danger that is keeping him from making it back safely. Unable to bear the suspense any longer, Sophia decides to enter the dark palace ruins herself. Clinging to her staff as she steps into the gloomy stone corridors, she nervously questions whether Naru is actually inside this place or if she has accidentally wandered into the wrong location. Trembling with fear with every step, she admits to herself how terrified she is, constantly worrying that some hidden threat might jump out from the darkness, completely unaware that Naru is already walking up from the corridor behind her. Suddenly, Sophia bumps directly into Naru with a startled gasp. Surprised to see her inside the ruins, Naru asks what she is doing there. Blushing in embarrassment, Sophia confesses that she had initially mistaken him for a hostile monster, apologizing and admitting that being left all alone in the dark forest had left her completely terrified. Naru gently reassures her, explaining that everything is fine because he has already successfully secured the legendary armor. He adds that his next step is to locate the Queen Mother's lost necklace, prompting an excited Sophia to suggest they immediately warp to their next destination. The scene transitions to the open ocean, where a sailboat glides across the shimmering blue water. Equipped with the unique diving armor, which allows him to breathe freely beneath the surface, Naru dives deep into the sea. Finding the Queen Mother's keepsake proves to be far less challenging than he anticipated, and he easily locates a decorative treasure box nestled on the seabed. Surfing with a breath of fresh air, Naru happily confirms that he has secured the necklace and prepares to return to the palace to inspect his prize. Meanwhile, inside the luxurious royal chambers, Queen Isabella is relaxing elegantly on her sofa. Her quiet rest is interrupted when her close confidant, Marie, approaches to deliver a report. Permitted to speak, Marie announces that the warrior Naru has already returned after successfully completing the royal request. The update catches Queen Isabella completely off guard, causing her to sit up in absolute disbelief. As Marie calmly confirms the report and reminds the sovereign of her previous request, Isabella is profoundly surprised by how incredibly fast the warrior managed to resolve the mission. Leaning forward and eagerly stepping onto the floor, she demands to know Naru's current whereabouts, and Marie politely informs her that the hero is already waiting directly outside her chamber doors. Clearing her throat, Queen Isabella formally grants the warrior permission to enter. Pushing open the heavy double doors, Naru steps inside, introducing himself and politely asking to be excused. Looking around the grand hall, he reflects on how much time has passed since he last stood in this room. Isabella welcomes him warmly, acknowledging that it has indeed been a long time since their last encounter. Observing his posture, Isabella gently inquires about his injured leg, asking if he has recovered. Kneeling respectfully before her, Naru assures the queen that he is doing completely fine now. Isabella then shifts the conversation to his mission, noting that she has already received the keepsake from her maid. Expressing her appreciation, Isabella declares that a proper reward is certainly in order for his swift success. Naru, however, politely declines, explaining that he did not complete the mission for a prize, but rather to test his returned strength and verify the current limits of his body. Isabella dismisses his refusal, pointing out that since he has always faithfully completed every request she has ever assigned to him, she is determined to give him a fitting reward. With a knowing smile, she commands the warrior to follow her directly to her private chambers. The scene transitions to the queen's lavishly decorated private bedroom. Sitting down on her chair and crossing her legs, Isabella remains silent for a moment, while a tense quiet fills the room. Naru follows her inside, taking a respectful kneeling stance on the floor as he awaits her next instructions, wondering what the sovereign has in store for him now that they are completely alone. Feeling a bit uneasy in the private setting, Naru politely asks Queen Isabella to clarify the nature of the reward she mentioned, wondering aloud why she required him to follow her all the way to her bedroom. In response, Isabella delivers a blunt and shocking command, telling him to simply worship her gros toes. Completely dumbfounded and sweating, Naru struggles to process her words, confusedly asking what she could possibly mean by such an unexpected request. Without hesitation, Isabella lifts her bag directly toward his face, clarifying with a playful smile that she is instructing him to massage her disgusting toes. Staring in absolute disbelief at the box presented right before his eyes, Naru sweat drops heavily, silently questioning how he managed to end up in such a bizarre and surreal situation. Smiling warmly, Isabella explains that this service is the very reward she has chosen to bestow upon him, asking if he doesn't view it as a massive honor. Hesitant and thoroughly flustered, Naru carefully questions whether it is truly appropriate for someone of his lowly standing to perform such an action for the queen. Isabella chuckles and reassures him that it is fine, before playfully asking if his reluctance means he is actually daring to refuse her royal gesture. Feeling backed into a corner with no other options, Naru quickly denies any refusal and reluctantly prepares to comply with the sovereign's highly sussy reward. Long before she wore the crown, Queen Isabella lived a different life as a high-class dancer, secretly sought after by high-ranking nobles in the kingdom. Her performances were incredibly graceful, leading many to compare her movements to those of a goddess. Captivated by her overwhelming beauty, King John fell deeply in love with Isabella at first sight during one of her performances, immediately summoning her to his royal court. Bowing humbly before the throne, Isabella formally offered her greetings to the sovereign. Mesmerized by her presence, King John remarked that she was even more beautiful up close and commanded her to dance solely for him from that day forward, officially taking her in as his concubine. Following the tragic death of the first queen in an accident, Isabella ascended to the throne as the new queen of the realm. However, her rise to power was quickly overshadowed by dark rumors, with critics whispering that she had secretly orchestrated the former queen's demise. Due to her low-born origins, she faced constant hostility, with numerous powerful factions actively scheming to remove her from the palace. The constant scheming eventually culminated in a deadly ambush during a rainy journey, where her carriage was run off a road. Surviving the crash, but left injured and stranded in the muddy terrain, Isabella struggled to stand amidst the pouring rain. As her loyal guards quickly rallied and shouted to protect their sovereign, a massive, roaring green orc emerged from the storm wielding a spiked club. Despite the knight's brave determination to never back down, the giant beast easily shattered their defensive lines with a single, devastating swing, sending the guards flying through the air. Left entirely defenseless on the ground, Isabella screamed in terror as the monstrous orc turned its attention directly toward her. Recalling his past duties, Naru remembers that he had been assigned the critical task of protecting the queen. As Isabella trembled on the muddy ground, crying out in absolute terror during the ambush, Naru leapt into action. Stepping firmly onto a nearby rock, he sprinted forward through the heavy rainstorm with his sword drawn. With incredible speed, he unleashed a series of devastating, glowing slashes that cut cleanly through the air, dealing a mortal blow to the rampaging orc. The massive beast let out a final, agonizing roar before collapsing heavily into the mud. As the threat was neutralized, Naru calmly knelt beside the crying queen, extending a gentle hand and softly asking if she was unhurt. Isabella could only stare up at her savior in stunned, silent gratitude as the rain poured over them. Transitioning back to the present moment inside her private chamber, Naru finds himself in a completely different and unexpected situation. As Queen Isabella's bare hand hovers directly in front of his face, he sweat drops in deep embarrassment, completely frozen. Isabella smiles with a playful, teasing expression, once again asking if he is seriously planning to refuse her request. Staring down at her feet, Naru is filled with quiet disbelief, reflecting that he never expected to end up performing such a sussy gesture. Feeling entirely helpless to decline her royal authority, Naru hesitantly looks down and stammeringly agrees to proceed with her terms. The scene opens inside the queen's luxurious gym room, where steam gently rises from the massive tub. Standing behind a decorative folding screen, Naru is left trembling in his white thick t-shirt, feeling completely exhausted as his hands shake from the sheer intensity of their encounter. Looking over at the sovereign, he quietly notes that Queen Isabella seems entirely unaffected and energetic, despite the rigorous close combat battle they just shared. Nearby, the red-haired queen stretches comfortably and ties her long hair back into a neat ponytail. Turning to face him, she observes that he has successfully finished washing up. Still visibly nervous, Naru politely responds that he was able to clean up well thanks to her kind hospitality. Isabella smiles warmly, reassuring him that because he carried out her previous request so excellently, this relaxing reward was fully deserved. As she gently tells him there is no reason to feel self-conscious, Naru gathers his courage and hesitantly asks if he might request one final favor from her. The queen looks over in surprise, wondering what kind of favor he has in mind. With a serious expression, Naru asks if she would be willing to grant him 10 royal pardons that can absolve any crime. Stunned by the sheer scale of the request, Isabella immediately questions if he has committed murder, turning away as she firmly declares that regardless of how important his completed mission was, she cannot easily authorize something of that magnitude. Hoping to salvage the situation, Naru looks at her pleadingly and asks if she could make just a single exception for him. The queen stands in silent contemplation for a moment, letting out a soft hum. Slowly, a playful smile appears on her face, and she lets out a quiet chuckle. Turning back to him with a teasing wink, Isabella offers a deal, stating that she will think about granting his request on the sole condition that he promises to keep satisfying her during their future friendly battle. With their agreement established, the focus of the story transitions back to Visdra Academy. The scene transitions to the grand buildings of Visdra Academy on a bright, clear morning. Back inside the main classroom, Naru sits at his desk feeling completely drained, yawning as he wonders if he went a bit too far with his wholesome close combat battle with the queen the previous day. Still, he reflects that returning to a proper indoor classroom feels far more comfortable than teaching inside a temporary tent. Looking around the room, Naru realizes the desks are completely empty, leaving him to wonder where all of his students have gone. He soon notices that the only person present is Lydia, who is resting her head on her desk, fast asleep. Looking at her quietly, Naru admits to himself that he feels a deep sense of sympathy every time he sees her. He notes that she struggles to get along with her classmates, wishing she would cooperate just a little bit more during lessons. Staring closely at her bandaged legs, he silently wonders if her peers have been actively avoiding her because of the severe burn scars she carries. Instantly catching himself, Naru slaps his cheeks in frustration, questioning what on earth he is thinking. However, as his gaze drifts back to Lydia, the thought of her scars continues to linger in his mind. He suddenly remembers a major detail, recalling how his specialized recovery drink had completely cleared away Melissa's physical strains and bruises after their wholesome training. This realization makes him wonder if his potent healing proteins could perform the same miracle for Lydia's deep burned scars. However, Naru quickly realizes a massive catch. The only way to administer his specialized, protein-rich recovery formula would require a highly sussy consumption method. He grimaces at the thought, knowing that proposing such a bizarre dietary training technique would inevitably get him labeled as a complete degenerate, even imagining the local guards arresting him on the spot. Still, the urge to help his student heal is strong, and pretending not to know about a potential cure feels wrong. Glancing nervously around the quiet classroom, he confirms that they are entirely alone. Driven by curiosity, Naru decides he might need to run a quick diagnostic test to prepare a sample of his healing potion. He reaches down to open his bags, but immediately freezes, realizing that attempting to extract his sweats while a student is sleeping is incredibly sussy. Before he can stop himself, the sound of rapid footsteps echoes outside, and the classroom door suddenly flies open. Hazley happily walks through the doorway, her face lighting up with excitement as she prepares to greet him. However, her greeting dies in her throat as she stops in her tracks, completely stunned. She stares in utter disbelief at her sweating, panicked professor, who is frozen in a highly sussy position with his hand still clutching his jacket. Trying to salvage his reputation, Naru frantically stammers to explain the situation, but his nervous excuses only make things worse. Staring at him with a dark, ominous shadow falling over her face, Hazley drops her exam results to the floor, her cheerful demeanor instantly replaced by deep suspicion as she coldly addresses her cornered teacher. Naru desperately tries to tell Hazley that she has it all wrong, but she immediately cuts him off, angrily demanding to know what he means by denying it. Pointing directly at his clothing, she accuses him of attempting to wear his jacket right in front of a sleeping classmate. Looking down with a pout, Hazley admits she is deeply disappointed, but not for the reason Naru expects. She blushes furiously and shouts that her true disappointment lies in the fact that he was trying to initiate a training session with someone else instead of her, calling his behavior absolute cheating. Completely dumbfounded, Naru can only utter a sound of pure confusion. Pointing at her in shock, he frantically waves his hands to clear up the massive misunderstanding, desperately pleading with her to keep her voice down before she wakes up the sleeping Lydia. Seeing his desperation, Hazley proposes a solution, asking him to provide immediate proof of his feelings. A highly confused Naru can only wonder what kind of proof she could possibly be talking about. Without warning, Hazley walks directly up to him and wraps her arms tightly around his handbag. Stunned by her sudden advance, a flustered Naru softly calls out her name as she climbs onto the seat. Looking down at her professor with a sussy grin, Hazley drops all hesitation and demands that they initiate an intense hand-to-hand combat right then and there, leaving the former warrior completely frozen in pure shock. Inside the quiet classroom, the white-haired Lydia slowly opens her eyes, waking up from her sleep as she takes in her surroundings. Meanwhile, the warm light of the setting sun bathes the grand towers of Visdra Academy. Standing near the entrance gates, Naru's ex-wife, Ashley, gazes up at the impressive structures, reflecting on the fact that this is indeed the very institution where Naru currently works. Wearing a luxurious blue and white t-shirt, Ashley looks visibly anxious as she contemplates her next move, resolving that if her attempt at a bribe fails to yield results, she will have no other choice but to speak to Naru personally. Her thoughts are suddenly cut short when she catches sight of a familiar figure in the distance, excitedly realizing that Naru is actually there. She watches him walk calmly through the crowded courtyard with his hands in his pockets. Although Ashley knows she desperately needs to talk to him, she finds herself unable to muster up the courage to step forward. Swallowing hard, she tries to reassure herself, thinking that there is absolutely no reason to be afraid of Naru. Stealing her resolve, she finally calls out his name. Hearing her shout, Naru turns his head in surprise, while Ashley anxiously wonders if he has already forgotten about her as they face each other once again. Confronting his ex-wife in the academy courtyard, Naru coldly asks in a formal tone what she has come all this way for. Ashley is immediately taken aback by his sudden formality, hurtfully questioning why he is speaking to her like a stranger when they still share such a deep history. Looking at her with a completely detached expression, Naru lets out an annoyed sigh, rubbing his forehead as he bluntly asks what she actually wants from him. Hesitating slightly, Ashley nervously pulls out a white envelope sealed with red wax and extends it toward him. Confused, Naru asks what the letter is for. Ashley explains that her family is hosting a celebration to mark the official lifting of their ancestral curse, earnestly requesting that Naru attend the party. Naru remains highly skeptical, asking why he should bother attending her family's event. Desperate to convince him, Ashley steps closer and pleads with him to change his mind, revealing that they plan to publicly announce him as the hero who successfully lifted the curse. She softly confesses that the entire celebration is actually meant more for his honor than for her family. Relenting under her persistence, a weary Naru sighs and reluctantly agrees to go. Surprised and relieved, Ashley seeks confirmation, and Naru carelessly waves a hand as he turns his back to walk away. However, as he departs, Naru sternly warns her never to approach him privately like this again, stating that the next time she tries to do so, he will simply pretend they do not know each other. Ashley is left standing completely alone, reaching out helplessly with a look of deep regret as he disappears from sight. The next day at the academy, Naru stands before his classroom to announce the conclusion of their daily lecture, thanking the group for their hard work. Hearing this, the energetic Angelina immediately leaps up from her desk to express her deep gratitude, while Lydia and Hazley quietly look on as the school day draws to a close. After finishing his lecture and gathering his notes on the desk, Naru watches the last of his students leave the classroom. Stretching tiredly, he reflects on how long it has been since he last had a drink, and decides that grabbing some alcohol might be a good idea. His quiet thoughts are interrupted when a bandaged hand suddenly tugs at his vest from behind. Turning around in surprise, Naru is startled to find Lydia standing right behind him. Scratching his head, Naru asks why she has not headed home yet. To his utter shock, Lydia quietly requests that her professor buy her some food. Dumbfounded, Naru stammers out a response, privately wondering what could possibly be wrong with her. He reflects that she is normally far too guarded and quiet to ever initiate this kind of close contact with him. Keeping his composure, Naru agrees to her request, telling her to wait just a moment while he finishes packing up. Sometime later, the pair walks through the streets of the capital under a warm sunset sky. Observing her quiet demeanor, Naru thinks to himself that Lydia is indeed an exceptionally reserved person. Hoping to break the silence, Naru gently asks what she would like to eat. Lydia simply responds that she has no preference, telling him he can decide. As Naru rubs his chin to ponder a good dining spot, Lydia suddenly adds that she has no desire to visit a crowded restaurant. Instead, she suggests they go somewhere completely quiet, proposing a trip to the secluded forest just outside the capital. Highly startled, Naru checks his watch and sweat drops, pointing out that going to a dark forest at this hour is quite risky since night is quickly approaching. However, Lydia merely clasps her bandaged hands behind her back and blankly asks if his refusal means the plan is no good, noting she simply assumed his training preferences would align with a quiet, secluded location. Leaning in with a blank expression, Lydia points out that the secluded forest is completely dark and devoid of people, making it the perfect place for a teacher to participate in an outdoor 1v1 gaming match with a student. Naru is instantly struck with panic, sweat dropping as he realizes with dread that she must have somehow found out about his previous private 1v1 match. He deduces that she likely heard the suspicious noises back then, completely exposing his arrangements. Leaning in to whisper directly into his ear, Lydia teasingly suggests they grab some food at the market first, before heading straight to the quiet forest, causing a heavily blushing Naru to sweat in pure embarrassment. Sometime later, the scene transitions to the dark woods at night, where a warm campfire crackles peacefully under the bright full moon. Sitting opposite each other by the flames, Naru gently asks Lydia if she is truly comfortable being so close to a fire given her past history with burn injuries. Lydia calmly reassures her professor, stating that she is completely fine as long as the fire remains small and controlled. To ease the tension, Naru reaches into his bag and asks if she drinks alcohol, presenting some drinks he brought along. Lydia looks at him with a sussy smile and playfully asks if his plan is to get her drunk so he can take advantage of her during an unscheduled 1v1 gaming match. Naru quickly denies the accusation, prompting Lydia to explain that she simply wanted to use this opportunity to get closer to him. Laughing it off, she reveals she was only joking and happily agrees to have a drink. Clinking their wooden mugs together in a cheerful toast, they enjoy their drinks under the night sky. Wiping his mouth with a sigh of content, Naru remarks on how wonderful it feels to eat and drink outdoors. As the campfire continues to burn, Lydia quietly speaks up to get his attention. Turning his head in confusion, Naru is left completely speechless when Lydia calmly asks if he would be willing to participate in an overnight rest and recovery training session with her as well, leaving him entirely stunned as the night grows quiet. Shocked by her incredibly blunt request, Naru can only stammer in pure bewilderment. Lydia calmly explains that she has seen such routines described before in the specialized boxing manuals Hazley always carries around, which initially sparked her curiosity. She adds that she knows Naru has already participated in a 1v1 gaming session with Hazley back at her estate. Lydia reasons that if he is the type of person who is willing to conduct joint training sessions with his students, he should have no issues holding a friendly battle with her as well, even though she feels self-conscious about her scarred body. Although Naru is slightly hurt by her blunt assessment of his teaching morality, he thoughtfully considers her situation. He admits to himself that he is highly curious to see what kind of healing effect his specialized energy potion will have on deep burned scars. Reaching out to hold her bag, Naru tells her that he will do exactly what she wants. Naru firmly states that in exchange, he needs her to promise that she will not regret this decision afterward. Lying back on the gym pit with complete resolve, Lydia softly confirms her readiness, preparing to begin their intense competitive 1v1 fight. Following their intense competitive 1v1 fight session, Naru lies on the gym pit next to Lydia. He gently asks if she has finally calmed down, and Lydia quietly confirms she has. Expressing her deep gratitude, Lydia confesses that she truly believes she would have to live the remainder of her life burdened by her deep burned scars. Naru smiles warmly and reassures her, explaining that, as her professor, it is only natural for him to do whatever it takes to help and support his students. Observing that the sun has completely set and night has fallen, Naru suggests they head back, and Lydia softly agrees. The next day, after concluding his class as usual, Naru prepares to head to the party Ashley requested him to attend. He remembers how his ex-wife had invited him to her family's upcoming party to celebrate the lifting of their ancestral curse, insisting that he must join them. Keeping his promise, Naru rides in a carriage under the night sky toward the grand estate. He admits to himself that he did not really want to attend, but reasons that, since they are formally ending their marriage, he has no choice but to see things through to the end. Arriving at the magnificent banquet hall, Naru's entrance is loudly announced to the entire room. His steps draw immediate and stunned attention from the gathered noble guests, who begin to whisper frantically among themselves. They gossip about his highly publicized divorce and stare in complete shock upon realizing that he is no longer limping or using a crutch. Feeling the intense weight of everyone's gazes, Naru notes that he expected this level of attention, resolving to quickly finish his business and leave as soon as possible. However, before he can move, a familiar voice calls out to him. Turning around, he is greeted by a beaming Ashley, who eagerly rushes down the stairs to greet her former husband. Looking up at him with a warm blush, Ashley expresses her sincere thanks for his arrival. Naru responds calmly, prompting a highly affectionate Ashley to admit that she has been thinking about him all day long. Sensing her overly familiar attitude, Naru merely offers a polite and detached response, wondering if she is truly telling the truth. Spotting Naru's arrival, Ashley's mother Michelle excitedly calls out to her son-in-law. Serena, his former sister-in-law, nervously chimes in to greet him as well. Clinging happily to Naru's arm, Ashley smiles as Naru notes that it has indeed been a long time since they last met. Michelle politely extends her gratitude to him for making the effort to attend their celebration. Taking a deep breath, Serena bows her head in embarrassment and offers a sincere apology for her past behavior, admitting that she was completely in the wrong. Ashley gently squeezes his cloth, coaxing him to forgive Serena since she has apologized. However, Naru finds himself unable to let go of the past so easily. He vividly remembers the cruel mockery Serena subjected him to when he was powerless, recalling how she had mockingly suggested he should just go ahead and die for his honor. He remembers her sneering that the sight of his limping ruined the taste of her tea, leaving him with a bitter realization that there is absolutely no way he can just forgive her. Their conversation is interrupted when Michelle proudly boasts that her husband can finally gaze upon the lake without suffering any seizures. She casually announces that because of this miracle, they have decided to officially withdraw his and Ashley's divorce proceedings. Serena happily supports this decision, pointing out that since they are not even legally divorced yet, Naru should spend the night with Ashley. Standing before his ex-wife's family, Naru is filled with intense frustration, privately thinking that if it were up to him, he would make a scene right then and there. He realizes that doing so would only make him look like the irrational one, leaving him desperately searching for a way out of this tricky situation. Fortunately, his thoughts are interrupted when a sharp voice suddenly calls out his name. Turning his head, Naru is startled to see his former adventure comrade, Melissa, running toward him in a stunning red evening gown. Ashley stares in shock as Melissa gracefully approaches the group and offers a polite bow, thanking Ashley for inviting her to the party. Melissa locks eyes with Naru and notes that she has things under control. Seeing her sudden appearance, Naru can only scratch his neck awkwardly, sweating under the intense pressure of the room. Suddenly, Melissa crosses her arms and loudly points out that Naru has forgotten something important yet again. Completely caught off guard, a bewildered Naru stammers in confusion. Before he can ask what she is talking about, Melissa firmly grabs his hand and declares that she cannot let this slide, insisting that she needs to take him away to scold him. Without waiting for a response, Melissa confidently walks away, dragging Naru along by his hand as they exit the banquet hall. Ashley is left behind in absolute shock, reaching out helplessly as her ex-husband is led away. Serena bites her lip in pure irritation, clicking her tongue as she laments that they had nearly successfully cornered him. However, Michelle remains completely relaxed, offering a smug smile. She crosses her arms and reassures her family that everything is fine, noting that Naru is a man who values his honor above all else. She confidently reasons that once they make a public announcement, Naru will have no choice but to comply with their plans. Meanwhile, walking through a quiet corridor, Naru asks Melissa what she meant by her sudden words, wondering why she dragged him away. Melissa looks back with a warm smile, confessing that she was merely acting to help him out of a tight spot. She reminds him that they have known each other for years, which allowed her to easily recognize his distress. Overcome with immense gratitude and relief, Naru is deeply moved, silently reflecting that there is truly nobody in the world who understands him quite like Melissa does. However, Melissa's expression grows serious as she warns him that the Lapone family seems to have a major announcement planned for the evening. Naru is left puzzled, wondering what they could possibly have to announce. Back inside the main hall, Michelle steps up to the grand podium, raising her voice to thank all of the gathered guests before formally announcing that her family has an important declaration to make to the entire realm. At the grand banquet hall, Michelle Lapone addresses the gathered crowd, proudly declaring to everyone that the ancient curse plaguing their family for centuries has finally been lifted. She goes on to publicly credit her son-in-law, Naru, for this miracle, expressing endless gratitude toward him. To the surprise of the guests, Michelle announces that the family has decided to completely withdraw the divorce proceedings, confidently claiming that neither her daughter nor Naru actually wants the marriage to end. However, her speech is abruptly cut short when the doors fly open, and Naru himself loudly interjects, declaring to the entire room that he absolutely wants the divorce to proceed. Standing firmly at the doorway with Melissa close by his side, Naru's sudden appearance and bold statement send a shockwave through the banquet hall. The noble guests begin to whisper frantically among themselves, questioning why Naru would reject a family of such immense wealth and prestige, even wondering if he has completely lost his mind. Facing the whispering crowd, Naru openly explains the truth, revealing that he had made a high-stakes bet with the gods, specifically to lift the Lapone family curse. He points out that the wager temporarily stripped him of his strength, and rather than supporting him, the family threw him out onto the streets the moment he became weak. He exposes their hypocrisy, noting how they are only trying to bring him back now that his powers have returned. With absolute finality, Naru looks toward Ashley and firmly declares to the entire room that no reunion will ever happen. This sudden exposure leaves Michelle and Serena in absolute shock and fury, with Serena angrily denouncing Naru for showing no appreciation for their supposed mercy. Yet, Naru's words quickly turn the tide of public opinion, as the guests begin to whisper that the Lapone family was clearly in the wrong all along. Hearing the truth laid bare, a horrified Ashley is overcome with a sudden wave of guilt and dread, realizing the immense sacrifice her husband made entirely for her sake, leaving her trembling in silent despair as she realizes the gravity of her mistake. Sometime later, behind the quiet banquet hall under the glowing full moon, Naru sits alone on a wooden bench, letting out a heavy sigh of relief as he reflects on how refreshing it feels to finally have the truth out in the open. His quiet moment is interrupted when Melissa approaches, warmly noting that she has finally found him. Naru looks up in surprise and greets his trusted comrade. Sitting down close to him on the bench, Melissa gently asks if he is holding up okay after the intense confrontation. Naru looks at her with a calm expression, confirming that he is indeed doing fine. Filled with deep admiration for his resolve, Melissa smiles warmly and places a gentle hand on his backpack, softly praising him for doing an outstanding job standing up for himself. Continuing their quiet moment behind the banquet hall, Melissa looks down at Naru with an affectionate expression, playfully showing him a friendly battle trick as a special reward for successfully standing up to his former in-laws. However, their interaction does not remain entirely private. Just around the corner of the stone wall, Ashley stands hidden in the shadows, having quietly followed Naru outside to speak with him. As she peeks past the edge of the pillars, she is completely stunned and devastated to witness Melissa sitting on the bench, with the two of them comfortably engaging in a competitive 1v1 fight together. Clutching her chest in sheer disbelief, Ashley can only watch in silent heartbreak, completely overwhelmed by the painful realization that Naru has moved on, and that she has truly lost his affection. Following the conclusion of their late-night private 1v1 match behind the banquet hall, the focus of the story shifts back to the grand estate of the Lapone family. Outside the massive iron gates of the mansion, local citizens gather in discontent, gossiping and openly expressing their disgust toward the noble family. A passerby even spits on the cobblestones, denouncing them as deceitful hypocrites, while another points out how disgraceful it was for the family to abandon Naru and file for a divorce when he was suffering through absolute torment entirely for their sake. From an upper-story window, Serena peers down at the murmuring crowd with a look of pure irritation and resentment. Crossing her arms, she scoffs at the ungrateful citizens, bitterly recalling how those very same people used to constantly hover around their estate in hopes of gaining some favor or benefit when their household was at its peak. Inside the quiet room, her mother, Michelle, calmly sips her tea on the sofa, advising Serena to simply ignore the gossipers, since they will eventually forget about the matter on their own. However, as Michelle sets down her cup, she lets out a heavy sigh, privately admitting that their situation has indeed become highly troublesome. She laments that ever since Naru's departure, the estate's wine cellar has been completely neglected, resulting in a disastrous harvest for the entire year. Hearing this, Ashley stands before her family in deep distress, tightly clenching her gown as she angrily blames her mother for their current ruin. She tearfully claims that she had never even considered divorcing Naru in the first place, prompting Serena to quickly defend themselves by stating they were merely offering sisterly advice. Michelle also chimes in to brush off the blame, reminding Ashley that, in the end, the decision to proceed with the divorce was entirely her own choice. Ashley looks down in regret, confessing that she never actually wanted to lose Naru, firmly believing that he was the only man who could ever truly be her husband. Hearing this sudden change of heart, a highly skeptical Serena is completely taken aback, hesitantly reminding her sister that she had openly detested Naru when he was powerless. Undeterred, Ashley tightly clasps her arms, resolutely declaring that she will do whatever it takes to win back Naru's feelings. Privately, however, her determination is driven by a dark, underlying fear. She secretly acknowledges that if their family fails to generate income and falls deep into debt, the bank will inevitably seize their land, and her mother would not hesitate to sell off both her and Serena to wealthy suitors simply to keep their household afloat. Ashley shudders as she contemplates the grim possibilities of her family falling into ruin under her mother's financial decisions. She worries she might be forced into a demanding caretaking role for an elderly lord, or worse, end up subjected to highly unusual and restrictive training methods by an eccentric master who favors intense, non-traditional hand-to-hand combat practice. Swallowing her fear, she realizes that the only logical way to escape such a bizarre and uncomfortable athletic fate is to successfully reconcile with Naru. Steeling her resolve, Ashley announces to her family that she will not be returning home for a while. When Michelle curiously asks what she intends to do, Ashley explains that she plans to wait directly in front of Naru's house to ask him for his forgiveness. Serena, looking highly skeptical, asks how long she intends to stay there, to which Ashley firmly declares that she will keep waiting until he finally forgives her. Serena then asks where her sister plans to eat and sleep during her vigil, prompting Ashley to confidently reply that she will simply take some household servants with her and live in an outdoor tent. Shaking her head in disbelief, Serena admits that the idea sounds absolutely terrible and that she could never endure such harsh, outdoor-friendly battle herself. Hearing this determined plan, Michelle happily claps her hands in approval, praising Ashley for thinking like a true daughter of their household. She reminds Ashley that she is still legally Naru's wife, urging her to go and make her intentions absolutely clear to him. Offering her full backing, Michelle promises to provide whatever resources or help her daughter might need along the way, leaving a grateful Ashley to swallow her anxiety and thank her mother. No matter what obstacles lie ahead, Ashley vows to regain Naru's favor. As she prepares for her long journey, her mind drifts to the image of Naru resting peacefully in bed, serving as a quiet reminder of the stable and secure bond she is now fully determined to win back. Ashley's thoughts continue to linger on their past hand-to-hand combat sessions, picturing herself alongside Naru as they participate in an intensive boxing round. Driven by these memories, she resolves with absolute determination that, through her persistent effort, she will definitely change Naru's mind and win back his heart. Night settles over the quiet city streets as Naru makes his way back, letting out a weary sigh while reflecting on what an incredibly long day it has been. However, his quiet walk home is suddenly interrupted when he spots something highly unusual in the courtyard and stops in his tracks with a puzzled expression. Looking across the paved stones, Naru is surprised to find a large red tent pitched right in the open area, leaving him to wonder if some kind of new shop has opened up nearby. He then notices a housemaid standing awkwardly outside the tent, looking visibly nervous. As soon as she catches sight of him, she quickly retreats inside, prompting a sweat-dropping Naru to wonder if she is actually a familiar face he has seen somewhere before. His confusion is quickly resolved when the tent flap opens and Ashley steps out with a bright smile, calling out to him affectionately and happily declaring that she has been waiting for him. Naru looks back with a cold and skeptical glare, bluntly asking what she is doing there. Ashley hesitantly explains that since they are currently in the middle of their official divorce reflection period, she felt they were failing to communicate at all and simply wanted a chance to talk. Naru merely offers a detached response, flatly asking if that is truly the case. Showing absolutely no interest in her attempts to connect, Naru dryly advises her to go ahead and reflect on her own before turning around and preparing to leave her behind. Terrified of letting him slip away, a panicked Ashley desperately begs him to wait, quickly chasing after him to grab a tight hold of his clothing. Naru stops in his tracks and asks why she is holding on to him. With her head bowed in deep anxiety and embarrassment, Ashley desperately pleads for him to stay, stammering that she has many important things she needs to tell him. In a desperate bid to force his attention and keep him from walking away, Ashley finally blurts out the shocking claim that she is actually bringing a new member. Completely dumbfounded by this unexpected announcement, a sweat-dropping Naru stares back in utter disbelief, pointing out the clear impossibility of her statement since it has been a full 2 years since they last shared a sparring rounds together. Ashley stubbornly raises her voice, childishly insisting that she does not know how but firmly maintaining that the new member is indeed his. Clenching her fists in tense frustration, she trembles as Naru looks down at her with a stern and cold gaze. He delivers a final, serious warning, stating that if she is lying about this matter, she will never see him again for the rest of her life. Realizing she has pushed Naru too far, a startled Ashley instantly retracts her claim, quickly apologizing and admitting that she was only lying to prevent him from leaving. She nervously promises that she will never do such a thing again. In her desperation, she reaches out and tightly grabs his cloth, but Naru immediately slaps her hands away, firmly breaking her grip. Looking at her with a cold, completely detached expression, Naru tells her to leave immediately. He turns to open his door, delivering a final farewell and wishing her a good life. Horrified by his finality, Ashley cries out to him, quickly grabbing hold of his arm once more to stop him from shutting the door. She desperately begs him to stay for just a short while, pleading for him to grant her just one more chance. Relenting slightly, Naru allows her inside his quiet, dimly lit quarters. Looking at her tiredly, Naru asks what it is she truly wants to tell him, leaving a highly nervous Ashley to hesitate in silence. Suddenly, without warning, Ashley decides to take matters into her own hands. She begins to wear her gym clothes in a desperate move. Stunned and sweat-dropping at her sudden actions, Naru asks what she is doing so abruptly. Flushed with embarrassment but filled with determination, Ashley looks up at him and states that if participating in an intense, friendly battle is what it takes to change his mind, she is fully prepared to do it. The scene opens inside Naru's quiet guest quarters, where the atmosphere is completely still as the night progresses. Lying back on a comfortable bed in a simple purple robe, Ashley rests with a weary sigh, reflecting on how exhausted she feels after such a long and emotionally draining day. As she rests, Ashley suddenly blinks her eyes open, wondering why the entire house has suddenly fallen so silent. Placing her hands gently over her stomach, she sits up on the edge of the mattress, growing increasingly concerned and wondering if Naru has actually left her behind. Seeking answers, she quietly pulls open her bedroom door and steps out into the dark, silent hallway, softly calling out Naru's name. As her shadow stretches across the wooden floorboards, she looks around only to realize that the main living area is completely empty. She stands in quiet bewilderment, wondering if Naru really did leave the estate and where he could possibly be going so late at night. Her quiet thoughts are suddenly interrupted by a faint, soft, gasping sound echoing from further down the corridor. Confused, Ashley pauses to listen closely, wondering about the source of the strange noise. Driven by curiosity, she slowly follows the rhythmic sound down the dark wooden hallway, her heart pounding heavily with nervous anticipation as she approaches a partially open doorway where a warm light spills out onto the floor. She hesitantly tells herself that it couldn't possibly be what she is thinking. Creeping up to the edge of the door, Ashley peeks inside and instantly freezes in absolute shock, her eyes widening in pure horror at the sight before her. Inside the brightly lit room, she witnesses Naru lying on a gym pit with his former adventure comrade, Melissa, wrapped tightly in his dumbbell as the two of them passionately participate in an intense, late-night 1v1 gaming match. Back in the hallway, Ashley stands completely frozen, clutching her chest in sheer disbelief as she struggles to process what is happening right in front of her. Her legs tremble uncontrollably as she remembers her own close combat battle with Naru just a short while earlier. She is utterly stunned that he is already engaging in a highly intense 1v1 gaming match with another woman so soon after their own session. Watching the two of them, Ashley steps back in absolute shock, whispering that she cannot believe her eyes. Meanwhile, inside the room, Naru suddenly senses a presence. Glancing toward the doorway, his eyes narrow as he realizes that his ex-wife is actively watching their hand-to-hand combat. To understand how things reach this point, the story transitions to a few hours earlier. Naru is sitting alone at his wooden table in deep contemplation, letting out a heavy sigh. He reflects on how he had reluctantly allowed Ashley to stay at his place. But knowing her stubborn personality, he worries she might try to stay until they are both old and gray. He tells himself that he desperately needs to find a way to get her out of his house as soon as possible. His quiet brainstorming is suddenly interrupted when the front door swings open and Melissa cheerfully walks in, calling out his name to let him know she has arrived. However, her cheerful greeting quickly dies in her throat as she stops mid-sentence, her eyes locking onto a pair of brown women's shoes sitting neatly by the entrance. Recognizing them instantly, Melissa is overcome with a sudden wave of intense fury. Clenching her fists as a dark, fiery aura erupts around her, she angrily accuses Naru of bringing another girl into his house while she was away. Cracking her knuckles with an ominous smile, she sharply demands that they sit down for a little talk about his secret visitor. Terrified by her explosive temper, a sweating Naru desperately waves his hands, begging her to calm down so he can explain the entire situation. Sometime later, the two sit down in the kitchen, where Melissa crosses her arms in deep thought. She skeptically notes his explanation about his ex-wife suddenly showing up at his door and attempting to initiate an unexpected training session. Under her sharp and highly suspicious glare, Naru can only scratch his neck awkwardly, sweating as he hopes she believes his side of the story. Continuing his explanation during the flashback, Naru admits that having been married to Ashley, he is well aware of how self-centered she can be. Hoping to find a solution, he earnestly asks Melissa to help him out with this delicate situation. Melissa readily agrees, assuring him that she understands his dilemma. To prepare for their strategy, she calmly wears her gym clothes, offering a warm and reassuring smile as she promises Naru that she will fully support him. Returning to the present moment, Naru's focus is suddenly broken as he catches sight of his ex-wife standing near the entrance. He is completely taken aback to find a heavily flushed Ashley leaning against the wooden doorframe, breathing heavily as she secretly starts a private shadowboxing session by herself. In the midst of his wholesome sparring rounds with Melissa, Naru can only stare in absolute bewilderment, silently questioning what on earth is going on, and wondering why Ashley is actively conducting a personal, self-reflecting moment right there in the doorway. Moving back to a few minutes earlier, Ashley stands in the quiet corridor, her heart pounding heavily as she hesitantly tries to convince herself that her suspicions cannot be true. She reminds herself that they had definitely shared a hand-to-hand combat practice session together just a short while ago. However, as she peeks through the opening of the door, her eyes widen in sheer shock. She is completely stunned to witness Melissa sitting astride Naru, actively engaged in a highly intense boxing round. Deeply devastated, Ashley covers her mouth in pure disbelief. She is overcome with rising indignation, wondering how Naru could possibly participate in such an intense friendly battle with another person right in front of her. Clenching her fists, with a dark, angry expression, she resolutely decides that she will confront him about this betrayal tomorrow morning. Back inside the room, Naru and Melissa continue their vigorous 1v1 gaming match. Glancing over toward the door, Naru notices that the entryway has suddenly fallen silent, realizing that his ex-wife is no longer standing in the doorway. Outside in the quiet corridor, Ashley is left leaning against the wall, blushing furiously as she reflects on their previous workout. Meanwhile, Naru remains completely dumbfounded by the highly unusual situation. He sweat drops in absolute confusion, trying to make sense of why Ashley would suddenly initiate a personal self-care routine right outside his room. However, when he looks back toward the door a moment later, he realizes she has quietly slipped away, leaving him to sweat drop in bewilderment at her sudden disappearance. Pausing their close combat battle for a moment, Naru asks Melissa to wait in the gym room while he goes to speak directly with Ashley, promising to return shortly. Melissa nods in silent agreement as Naru sits up to prepare. Buttoning his white shirt, Naru steps out into the hallway and quietly peeks into the guest room, only to find Ashley lying peacefully on the bed, seemingly fast asleep under her covers. Observing her quiet state, Naru reflects on their history, realizing that although he thought he understood her character well from their past marriage, he had clearly been careless in anticipating her unpredictable behavior. Returning to the gym room, Naru lets out a weary sigh as he lets Melissa know he is back. Sitting up under the sheets, Melissa curiously asks if he managed to have a conversation with his ex-wife. Naru explains that she appeared to be asleep, so he decided to come right back. He sincerely apologizes to Melissa for bringing this inconvenience upon her, sheepishly admitting his theory that Ashley would have simply packed up and left if she witnessed them engaging in their boxing round session. Melissa warmly reassures him that it is perfectly fine, gently advising him to simply wait and speak with Ashley the following morning. Meanwhile, the perspective shifts back to the quiet guest room. Lying on her side, a heavily flushed Ashley trembles as she continues her private, shadow boxing session. The next morning, bright sunlight streams through the window of the guest quarters as Ashley slowly blinks her eyes open. She stretches with a soft yawn, rubbing her eyes as she realizes that morning has already arrived. However, as she sits up in her purple robe, she suddenly gasps in shock upon noticing Naru standing quietly right beside her bed. Startled by his imposing presence, Ashley instinctively clutches her blanket to her chest, nervously asking why he is standing there looking so intimidating. Looking down at her with a serious expression and his hands resting on his hips, Naru asks if she still has no intention of leaving his home. Ashley hesitantly agrees, softly declaring that she is fully determined to stay because she wants to win his heart back by any means necessary. Letting out a weary sigh as he scratches his head, Naru points out the sheer absurdity of her decision, reminding her that she is choosing to stay even after witnessing him participating in 1v1 gaming sessions with other women. He bluntly asks if she is truly comfortable with such an arrangement, leaving a sweating Ashley completely speechless as she struggles to find a response. Seeing her stumble over her words, Naru gestures toward the door, dryly stating that, if she cannot accept this reality, she should pack up her things and leave immediately. Terrified of being cast out, Ashley quickly bolts up from the mattress and stands before him, desperately begging him to wait. With tears in her eyes and her head bowed in deep remorse, she tearfully confesses that everything is entirely her fault. She admits her deep regret, acknowledging that she now realizes how horribly she treated him in the past. Bowing before him in her purple robe, Ashley passionately begs her former husband for forgiveness, promising to listen to his every word if he will only grant her one final chance to prove her devotion. Naru firmly tells his ex-wife Ashley that even if she goes to such desperate lengths, he has absolutely no intention of withdrawing their divorce. Despite his cold attitude, Ashley remains determined, replying that it does not matter to her because she believes she might still find a way to win his heart back if she puts in her absolute best effort. Looking up with deep emotion, she resolutely declares that as long as there is even a tiny sliver of hope remaining, she refuses to let it go. Following this intense confrontation, Naru sits down with Melissa to explain the entire situation, recounting exactly what his ex-wife had said to him. While taking a sip of her warm drink, Melissa processes the news, asking for clarification on whether his ex-wife is truly planning to stay with him inside her house for the time being. However, her calm demeanor quickly vanishes as she glares at him in sudden anger, demanding to know if he has completely lost his mind. Nervously sweating under her intense gaze, Naru quickly backtracks and agrees with her, stating that he will immediately inform Ashley that such an arrangement is entirely impossible. Seeing his quick compliance, Melissa lets out a massive sigh of relief as she leans against the table. She thoughtfully points out that since Ashley was once his family and is now left living out in the open, perhaps the situation cannot be entirely avoided. Turning away with a bright and happy smile, Melissa privately reassures herself that Naru belongs to her anyway, so she ultimately has absolutely nothing to worry about. Her sudden kindness and understanding leave Naru deeply touched, silently thinking to himself that she is an absolute angel. Ultimately, an agreement is reached where Ashley is permitted to stay at Melissa's home under the strict condition that she handles the domestic chores. Taking her new role seriously, Ashley begins to manage the cleaning and cooking around the house. Wearing a simple maid cap and apron, she kneels on the floor to scrub the wooden boards, sweating slightly as she hesitantly wonders if she is doing the work correctly. She also takes charge of preparing meals by the hot fireplace, diligently working to prove her devotion to Naru. Inside his room, Naru sits at his desk, trying to focus on his work, but he quickly leans back with a pencil in his mouth. Noting to himself that things are simply not progressing very well, he suddenly tilts his head down toward the space beneath his desk, gently reminding his ex-wife, Ashley, that he had already instructed her to clean up properly. Underneath the wooden table, Ashley has been actively participating in a boxing practice session with him. Looking up with a heavily flushed face and tears in her eyes, she softly apologizes for her clumsy execution. It is clear that she is putting in an immense amount of effort to stay in his good graces, dedicating herself fully to these sparring practices. A few days later, the focus of the story shifts back to Visdra Academy, where Naru has been summoned directly to the president's office. Standing respectfully inside the book-lined study, Naru asks the elderly academy president about the specific reason behind his sudden invitation. Turning around with a gentle smile, the president reassures him that it is nothing to worry about, explaining that he has noticed a massive improvement in the academic performances of the remedial students under Naru's care. Specifically, the president highlights the impressive progress in Hazley's and Lydia's recent grades, as well as the noticeable improvement in Lydia's treatment and overall well-being. Sitting down behind his grand desk, the president formally expresses his hope that Naru will agree to officially take on the permanent role of their supervising professor moving forward. Naru is caught completely off guard by the sudden proposal, hesitantly repeating the prestigious title of supervising professor. The president confirms the offer, apologetically admitting that given Naru's outstanding skills, this official appointment should have been made a very long time ago. Clasping his hands together on the desk, the president asks Naru for his honest thoughts regarding the promotion. After a brief moment of silent contemplation, Naru responds that he would absolutely love to accept, stating that as long as he can be of genuine help to his students, he does not mind the extra responsibility at all. Highly pleased by his dedication, the president praises his boldness, noting that such a confident attitude is exactly what he would expect from a legendary former warrior. With a warm and welcoming nod, the president officially welcomes him to his new position, expressing that the entire academy is expecting great things from him as Professor Naru. Meanwhile, the scene transitions to the majestic Rizzes royal palace, where the sounds of weak coughing echo through the grand stone corridors. Deep within the royal bedchambers, the king of Rizzes lies extremely frail and ill beneath his covers, struggling to breathe as his physical health continues to deteriorate. Inside the royal bedchambers, the king of Rizzes lies weakly under his blankets, groaning in visible pain and discomfort as his health continues to fail. A palace maid quickly steps up to his bedside to attend to him, offering a warm drink as he is suddenly seized by another fit of severe coughing. Just outside the chambers, two palace officials whisper anxiously to one another, noting with deep concern that His Highness's condition is clearly worsening day by day. They quietly acknowledge the gravity of the looming crisis, pointing out that to make matters even worse, the sovereign currently has no direct heir to succeed him on the throne. Unbeknownst to the gossiping officials, Queen Isabella stands hidden just around the corner, peeking out from behind a massive stone pillar. Dressed in her striking red gown, she listens closely to their worried conversation, touching her chin thoughtfully as she silently processes the dire news regarding the kingdom's fragile future.